Hey guys, tonight we travel back through the centuries to a hushed Roman alleyway, where the flicker of oil lamps casts trembling shadows on ancient walls, and the cool breeze carries whispers of an empire's glories. You can almost feel the worn cobblestones under your sandals, sense the weight of a distant past pressing gently on your shoulders. Yet, even in this dreamy setting, you're not exactly safe. After all, these Romans practically invented intrigue, and if you get too cozy, you might end up on some senator's bad side. You probably won't survive this if you wander off alone. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, why not drop a comment with your location and the current time where you are? It's always fun to see where and when this Roman rendezvous finds you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step tentatively onto a winding street, the hush of the late hour broken by the soft clatter of iron-rimmed wheels on worn paving stones. Above you, the sky is unexpectedly clear. Glimmering stars might as well be silver coins scattered across black velvet. Each breath you take fills your lungs with a mix of dust and the faint tang of olive oil smoke drifting from hidden courtyards. The city of Rome never truly sleeps, but in these hours, it dozes like a cat curled up by a dying hearth. Wandering through these winding paths, you hear the muted chatter of distant neighbors locked in late-night debates over the price of grain, or the best way to soothe a pesky cough. Yes, here in the darkness, stories of remedies for common sniffles are passed around like contraband gossip, and you can't help but eavesdrop. Columns and arches loom around corners, silent guardians of a metropolis that has stood for centuries. One mainstream historical fact that stands out is the advanced urban planning that allowed Romans to construct a massive network of roads, connecting the heart of the empire to its farthest reaches, a feat nearly unrivaled in the ancient world. Even at this hour, you sense the empire's persistent heartbeat, pulsing through its stone arteries. You wonder how many footsteps have trodden these paths before yours, and how many of those weary souls trudged the streets, at night with a stuffy nose or a nagging cough. While the gloom wraps around you like a cozy cloak, you notice odd details that might make you grin. For instance, rumor has it the Romans sometimes used catapults to throw not just rocks, but the occasional beehive at their enemies. Part warfare, part extreme beekeeping, if you will. As you drift deeper into the city, you also pass some of the doorways where official night watch patrols would stand guard, ensuring no thieves lurk too near. But at this moment, those patrols, too, seem to be nodding off. The hush lets you imagine all sorts of secrets locked behind ancient walls. You try not to jump when a cat, yes, a real cat, scampers by, startled by your late-night presence. Ancient Rome had its fair share of stray felines, creeping through the narrow lanes, scaring unsuspecting wanderers just like you. Speaking of scares, you feel a slight chill, maybe from the night breeze or from the thought that thousands of souls, both illustrious and ordinary, once walked here. Some of them likely fought for power in the Senate, others might have simply bartered for onions in the marketplace, and, of course, some sneezed their heads off when a cold struck. You pass a crumbling portico where someone is humming a lullaby. The melody hovers in the air like a half-forgotten secret. You almost suspect it's a coded chant to ward off an impending flu, but it might just be a mother soothing her child. The Romans placed as much faith in whispered charms as in the latest salves, believing that certain voices and verses could keep sickness at bay. If you squint, you can see the warm glow of a brazier flickering in a side alcove. Two figures huddle around it, exchanging animated conversation peppered with occasional laughter. You sidle closer, your curiosity getting the better of you. One friend complains about a scratchy throat, while the other insists that a bizarre remedy involving honey, vinegar, and something you can't quite catch. Did they say lizard tails? We'll fix them right up. You roll your eyes, trying to keep a straight face. Historians still argue whether these wild-sounding remedies were legitimate attempts at treatment, or simply folk customs that spread from mouth to mouth without any scientific basis. Then again, it's easy to be skeptical in the modern day. The entire empire saw itself as the pinnacle of civilization, so they had to be onto something, right? A wry smile curls on your lips. If you had a denarius for every strange remedy you've heard so far, you might be able to buy your own villa. But that's the charm of nighttime Rome. You never know what odd advice or questionable cure might be drifting on the breeze. You continue your stroll, occasionally stepping aside to avoid a snoring stray dog. If dogs could talk, you bet they'd share equally odd tips for how to handle a sneezing fit. You head down another street, passing beneath an ornate balcony that seems to glow under the soft light of the moon. A woman leans over the rail, placing a small candle as an offering to a household deity. You think you hear her murmur a prayer for good health, or maybe it's a prayer for restful sleep. You can't help but wonder if she also knows about that rumored cold cure. Something so strange and comedic that you might suspect it's an elaborate prank. Perhaps she's decided to stick to simpler methods, praying to any god who'll listen, hoping they'll keep runny noses away. Another corner, another unexpected grin. You spot a donkey lazily munching on some leftover produce that's spilled from a nearby crate. For a moment, you consider how on earth the donkey managed to find food in the dead of night. But then you recall that Rome's mania for all things grand didn't always extend to waste management. Roman streets, for all their engineering marvels, could still be cluttered with scraps. You can't help but stifle a laugh as you watch the donkey chew. It almost looks at you with a silent question. Hey, do you have any bizarre home remedies to share with me, too? You're half tempted to respond. But you know even donkey conversation is a bit out there, even for this sleepy stroll. You keep wandering, letting your mind drift across centuries. It's not every day you get to see the capital of an ancient empire in its quiet hours. The buildings around you, tall and proud, still stand as monuments to Roman ambition and ingenuity. You can't help but wonder how many different languages have been spoken in these streets. Latin, Greek, countless tongues from distant provinces. Everyone from senators to slaves, from philosophers to fishmongers, once roamed these alleys. Time seems to slow, as though the night itself invites you to let go of your modern cares. Even your feet drag a bit, lulled by the hush. In that lull, you sense that something extraordinary is about to unfold, some piece of knowledge or memory that the night wants to share with you. You take a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill your lungs. After all, if the rumored remedy is real, who knows when you might need it? All around you, columns cast elongated shadows that cross your path like silent guides, urging you forward into the heart of the city, where secrets, mundane and magical, wait to be uncovered. You find yourself moving closer to the beating heart of the city, lured by a soft rumble of voices that seems at odds with the lateness of the hour. Ahead, torchlit columns rise in stately rows, their fluted surfaces worn by countless generations. It's the Roman Forum, a grand stage for political showdowns, public announcements, and everyday commerce alike. Now, as you step carefully over uneven stones, you glimpse small clusters of people lingering under covered walkways, murmuring about their daily affairs in voices hushed by the weight of nighttime. You catch fragments of conversation. Someone complaining about the price of fresh bread, another fussing over a legal dispute with a distant cousin. Despite the shadows draping the columns, life here never fully ceases. Weaving among these scattered groups, you notice that even at night, the Forum exudes a sense of importance, as though it's waiting patiently for the next assembly, the next oration, or the next big revelation. A faint laughter floats in the air. Two young men recline near a broken statue's pedestal, sharing what looks like a half-eaten bowl of something that might be porridge, or perhaps an herbal broth. One of them sneezes. You pause, ears peaked, half expecting him to follow it up with some outlandish attempt to chase the cold away. Instead, he just wipes his nose on his tunic sleeve. Classy. Yet there's a buzz, a whisper around you, suggesting that not everyone is content with letting a cold or cough run its course. Rumor has it a neighbor of a neighbor discovered some bizarre remedy involving a substance so odd, it makes you question how bored the first person must have been to try it in the first place. You lean in to listen. Apparently, the cure isn't just about herbs or spices. Romans were big on those already. No, this rumored concoction hints at something that might have crawled or slithered before it ended up in a mortar and pestle. A little wave of curiosity and a touch of queasiness ripples through you. Daily routines in ancient Rome can be surprisingly relatable, and you glimpse traces of them all around the Forum. By day, this space bustles with lawyers pleading cases, merchants hawking goods, and politicians puffing up their egos. Shoppers haggle over produce, wandering from one stall to the next in search of the best fig or the cheapest fish sauce. Children dart underfoot, playing games with knucklebones or scribbling chalk drawings on the pavement. At night, the mood changes. Some folks still gather to socialize. There's always news to discuss, deals to finalize, or gossip to spin. But many are just passing through, perhaps heading home from the baths or a late shift in a nearby bakery. One mainstream historical fact about Roman daily life is the concept of a main meal senev in the late afternoon or early evening. often followed by leisurely conversation and maybe even philosophical debates. By the time darkness settles, people generally wind down, though apparently not always in complete silence. You can't help but smile as you overhear a snippet of idle chatter about odd cures. A short man with thinning hair is insisting he once heard of a potion brewed with the sweat of gladiators mixed with a few drops of goat's blood. His friend snorts, skeptical. A third bystander nods sagely, claiming that her great-grandmother swore by soaking used wool in vinegar to chase away colds. Perhaps no one has a clue what's genuine and what's the result of a lively imagination. Historians still argue whether these more eccentric references were widespread reality, or if they were comedic exaggerations repeated for dramatic effect at dinner parties. Either way, it's the kind of conversation that might make you think, hey, maybe I'll just stick to rest and honey tea. A gentle breeze rustles the frayed hems of your cloak, reminding you that the night has its own chill. You catch a light joke from a nearby vendor, still guarding her wagon of produce. She remarks how even in ancient times, some people believed that wearing a laurel wreath to bed would ward off illness, because the gods apparently give bonus points for fashion. That quick quip is enough to break the solemn atmosphere that sometimes envelops these ruins. Yes, it seems even the stern columns and imposing statues can't entirely suppress the Romans' knack for humor, especially when it comes to the small annoyances of life like the common cold. You drift nearer to a marble rostrum that, in the daytime, serves as a speaker's platform. Tonight, it's more like a place for late-night banter among a few passers-by. The conversation steers toward remedies for sniffles, and an older woman in a tattered cloak confides that she's heard of a truly odd ingredient rumored to have miraculous properties. It comes from, she lowers her voice, glancing around to be sure no one's eavesdropping, certain aquatic creatures prized by the Egyptians for centuries. You can't quite make out which creature she's referring to, but the mention of a slimy texture and a pungent odor sends a shudder through you. Your mind darts to images of fish, mollusks, or perhaps something amphibious gleaned from the banks of the Nile. Quirky or not, it has your curiosity piqued. Apparently, someone has been peddling potions claiming to incorporate that exotic element right here in Rome. It's easy to see how markets for these cures could flourish. Rome is, after all, the hub of trade routes that span from Britannia to Asia Minor. Exotic goods pour in constantly. Silks, spices, rare animals, you name it. It's only logical that weird substances pass hands too, especially if they promise to fix your scratchy throat in record time. In a city this large, word of mouth travels quickly, and so do unscrupulous merchants. At least you suspect unscrupulousness. Why else would someone hawk something with such questionable ingredients? The sound of footsteps behind you makes you turn. A robed figure, perhaps a scholar or an amateur philosopher, stops in front of a carved inscription on a stone pillar. By the faint torchlight, he appears to study it closely, as though searching for some hidden instruction or formula. For a moment, you picture him deciphering an ancient text describing that very remedy you've been hearing about. Could he be on the brink of a great discovery, or just deciphering a love poem scratched into the stone by a bored scribe? The man chuckles to himself, which isn't eerie at all in the middle of the night, and then shuffles away into the gloom. You try not to read too much into it, but your imagination is on a roll. Maybe he read a coded recipe for a curative salve that has remained secret for centuries. The odd hush returns. The few voices that remain now mingle with the rustle of leaves from a lone tree near the edge of the forum. You venture that this is the perfect time to explore how the Romans themselves might start the day, cold or no cold. Typically, early morning would see bakers lighting their ovens, slaves running errands, and farmers arriving with fresh produce for the markets. The forum would gradually fill up, reaching a crescendo of chaos by midday. Eventually, the swirl of daily life would deposit rumors, jokes, and yes, outlandish cures into every corner of the city. Your sandals scrape gently over the stones as you circle a short flight of steps leading to a half-lit archway. A cat slinks by, pausing to peer at you with glowing eyes, as if it knows exactly where that rumored remedy can be found, and is taunting you to follow it. The cat disappears behind a column, its soft paws silent on the marble. You reflect on the bizarre swirl of knowledge that thrived in Rome, practical engineering on one hand, and on the other, a willingness to experiment with just about anything that might fend off illness. Perhaps the empire's can-do spirit extended to medical curiosities too. Still, a seed of intrigue is planted. The official rumor is that this remedy is something to behold, a substance so odd, so unexpected, that it left travelers from distant lands scratching their heads. It's not on every merchant's shelf, of course, nor is it something you'd casually request in polite company. But if you listen to the murmurs of the forum, you'll pick up the clues needed to find it. You have a feeling the more you learn, the stranger it will seem. And maybe, just maybe, the next time your nose starts to drip, you'll think twice about dismissing old Roman remedies altogether. You head deeper into the labyrinth of narrow streets, leaving the forum's columns behind. A low, hanging archway leads you past shuttered workshops and silent taverns. In the faint torchlight, you spot a cluster of chalk scribbles on the wall, simple sketches of everyday life: a donkey hauling a cart, a fish, an indecipherable swirl that might be an attempt at a human face. It's a modest glimpse of how Romans channel their daily experiences and, occasionally, their superstitions onto whatever surfaces they can find. Your breath escapes in a whispery laugh as you imagine them doodling, hoping that whatever ailment has befallen them might magically lift once the day's frustrations are scrawled in chalk. Moving on, you notice that the night air carries a cool dampness, hinting that dawn isn't too far off. You tug your cloak tighter, mindful of every minor breeze and draft that creeps under your collar. The Romans, you recall, were particularly attuned to changes in the weather. Some believed that chills from night air could unbalance the body's humors and invite sickness in. In fact, one mainstream historical fact is that Roman medical theory, influenced by the Greeks, often revolved around balancing four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. If one humor dominated, people were sure to blame everything from a pesky sniffle to a bout of insomnia on it. You might roll your eyes at this old-school biology, but hey, at least they had a structured approach to explaining why you start sneezing. That said, rational explanations were only half the story. The rest lay in the realm of superstition. Romans held onto a sprawling web of beliefs, mixing official religion with household deities and a dash of good old-fashioned fear. If you woke up with a fever, you might blame the gods for being displeased. If your next-door neighbor gave you the evil eye at the market, it was entirely plausible that he'd cursed you into a coughing fit. Now, as you make your way through a narrow alley, you see little signs of these beliefs: small altars in corners, dried herbs pinned to doorposts, even a faint scattering of ash around a threshold. Perhaps someone performed a nighttime ritual to ward off nightmares or sniffles, or both. You spot a figure ahead of you, seated on a low wooden stool by a shuttered produce stall. Her braided hair glints in the torchlight, and she's muttering to herself. As you approach, you catch the word malaria, which, interestingly, the Romans also blamed on bad air, literally, malaria. You can't help but grin at the pun that survived centuries. Never mind that it's rooted in the idea that foul, smelling mists brought sickness. She looks up, noticing your approach, and offers a toothless smile. Her voice is scratchy, as if she's on the verge of losing it, and she beckons you over to her stall. Bad air, she croaks, pointing at the sky with a bony finger. Whether she's warning you about a potential cold, or simply complaining about the night chill, you can't be sure. She launches into a tale of how, last winter, her entire household came down with a brutal cough. They tried everything: hot compresses of rosemary, incantations muttered at dawn, even sprinkling salt along the windowsills to ward off malicious spirits. Nothing worked until her husband visited a traveling merchant who claimed to have essence of phoenix tears, bottled in a small clay jar. Quirky or fringe tidbit? Check. She swears that as soon as they inhaled the pungent vapor from that jar, like sniffing an extremely potent vinegar, the cough lifted within hours. You raise an eyebrow. Phoenix tears. She assures you, yes indeed. It was expensive, but how can you put a price on health? She says. You stifle a polite chuckle. The woman's conviction is unshakable, and you decide not to argue the finer points of mythical birds. Trading carefully along the cobblestones, you reflect on how easily such superstitions take root. When you're shivering in bed, nose dripping like a faulty aqueduct, rational thought sometimes goes out the window. If someone offers a miraculous cure, especially with a dash of mystical flair, you're bound to try it. Then again, you consider that the Romans were practical too. Boiling water, rest, and herbal remedies were all standard. Yet, the day's belief in humors and the night's inclination toward magic often meshed seamlessly. Imagine reading a treatise on balancing bodily fluids by lamplight, then concluding with a quick prayer to Mercury for good measure. It's not that different from modern folks who rely on both science and a lucky charm, just in case. In a small courtyard just beyond, you see someone with a basket full of damp laundry, hanging it on a line even at this late hour. The swirl of cloth catches your eye. You recall that some Romans believed wearing freshly laundered linen in the evening might stave off night demons that cause illness. Something about starting the darkness free from the day's grime. Of course, historians still argue whether references to these night demons in certain texts were literal or metaphorical stand-ins for airborne diseases. But symbolic or not, you're grateful for any reason to put on clean pajamas at bedtime. As you round another corner, you come upon a small fountain where water trickles from the carved mouth of a stone lion. The trickling noise is soothing, but it also reminds you of those times you felt your sinuses draining into your throat. You grimace at the memory of your last cold. A pair of adolescents fills clay jugs at the fountain, their quiet chatter echoing softly off the courtyard walls. One jokes that if you keep water from this lion's mouth under your bed, you'll never snore. You consider it might just be a sneaky ploy to have an excuse to skip chores. Sorry, Mom. I need the fountain water for a good night's sleep. You take a moment to rest on the fountain's edge, hands pressed against the cool stone. You imagine how rumor and superstition swirl in a place like this, day in and day out. A single offhand comment, I used lion fountain water and felt better, could spread into a neighborhood phenomenon, fueling lines of desperate people each dusk, scooping water into every container they can find. Is it any more bizarre than the donkey ears or phoenix tears you've already heard about? Honestly, at this point, you'd try anything if you were miserable enough. Scraping your sandal on the worn ground, you stand up and drift toward the next passage. Beneath a modest portico, you glimpse a small group of figures, cloaked against the night chill, each holding a sprig of something in their hand. Maybe sage, maybe thyme, common staples in Roman kitchens and also in rituals to repel sickness. You linger at the edge of the group, picking up strands of conversation about how the evil eye can weaken a person's defenses and how sprinkling the right mixture of herbs on the threshold wards off gossipy neighbors who might accidentally curse you with their envy. One of them even cracks a joke. If it were really that easy to ward off annoying neighbors, I'd have opened an herb shop ages ago. As you quietly watch, the group forms a small circle and recites a low chant, something about health, the gods, and the changing of the seasons. It could be a family tradition, a survival of older, more arcane practices, or just a friendly get-together to quell the fear of catching a seasonal bug. The torches flicker around them, and the smell of singed herbs drifts through the air, tickling your nostrils. You half expect to sneeze, but you manage to keep it at bay. Maybe there's some efficacy in that swirl of burning thyme. Stories like these are woven into the fabric of Rome's night, like invisible threads connecting doorways, archways, and hearts. By the time the sun rises, these folks will disperse, carrying with them a renewed sense of security, or at least the feeling that they've done something proactive. Meanwhile, doctors in the city rely on their knowledge of humoral balances and classical texts, prescribing dietary changes or gentle steam inhalations. And yes, for the more well-to-do Romans, prayers at certain temples might be recommended. Because you never know which deity is pulling the cosmic strings on your sniffles. You continue winding your way through these narrow corridors, a silent observer of how fear and faith mingle. Superstitions, as you see, aren't just about ignorance. They're about finding comfort in a world that can sometimes feel unpredictable. The Romans faced plagues, contaminated water, and limited medical understanding, so it's no surprise they hedged their bets with a little mystical insurance. In a city so grand, with so many ideas and influences swirling about, you guess that anything providing even a semblance of reassurance could take hold. A faint glimmer of light at the end of the alley catches your eye. Perhaps the glow of a larger street lamp, or the reflection of moonlight on polished stone. You head that way, drawn by the thought of moving closer to the center of town, where you suspect more secrets about that baffling Roman cold remedy might be whispered among the night owls. You smile to yourself, thinking of the donkey doodle, the phoenix tears, the lion fountain water, and the ever-present fear of bad air. One thing's for sure, you'll never see a box of tissues the same way again. And in the hush of this ancient night, anything, yes, anything seems possible. You emerge from the winding alleys into a modest square where the shadows of tall insulae, multi-story apartment blocks, stretch like silent sentinels. Flickers of torchlight illuminate an unexpected sight, a small group gathered around a figure in a dark cloak, his hands moving in slow, deliberate gestures. You edge closer and realize he must be a physician of sorts, explaining a treatment regimen to the few souls brave enough to seek late night counsel. He's no smooth-talking miracle peddler. His tone is measured, his instructions precise. You notice how he keeps drawing shapes in the air, maybe a habit he picked up from Greek tutors, or an attempt to illustrate the concept of bodily humors flowing in harmony. Plenty of rest and warm compresses. You hear him say, plus a mild infusion of rosemary and mint. Of course, it's standard advice, hardly the outlandish cure you're chasing. Still, the man's presence underscores a mainstream historical fact. Many Roman physicians were either Greek themselves or heavily influenced by Greek medical knowledge, a testament to how cultural cross-pollination gave Roman medicine its shape. It's a far cry from the weird gossip about phoenix tears and donkey doodles. This is the more sober side of healing textbooks, empirical observation, and consultations with tutors who studied Hippocrates or Galen. The small crowd around him nods earnestly, like they're finally hearing something more grounded than whispered superstition. But even as you watch, a stooped old woman approaches from the edge of the gathering. She grips a walking stick decorated with symbols you don't recognize. Leaning forward, she asks if a certain incantation might help speed her recovery. The physician doesn't exactly roll his eyes. Romans were rarely so brash in public. But he does clear his throat as if to buy time. You can almost sense his internal struggle. He wants to emphasize practical treatments, but he also knows that most patients in Rome never fully divorce faith from medicine. After all, how could they, when their entire worldview ties the favor of the gods to daily existence? That's why temples are such a key part of healing here. You recall how, by day, the temple of Asclepius on Tiber Island teems with those seeking divine intervention. They bring offerings, coins, fruit, or even small terracotta body parts representing whatever needs fixing. Got a broken arm? Offer up a ceramic arm. Pilgrims pray for relief from aches, infections, and the dreaded chills that come when the wind turns cold. While the official stance might be that incantations and prayers can only aid the healing process, you suspect many folks place them at the center of their cure. Sometimes the lines blur so much you can't tell where science ends and faith begins. You step away from the physician and wander a bit further, your ears tuned for more clues. In an adjacent courtyard, soft chanting rises above the quiet. You peer around a stone column to see several women dressed in simple tunics, standing before a small shrine dedicated to what looks like a household goddess. The air is thick with the scent of burning sage, which the Romans believe can purify spaces, and possibly sinuses, for all you know. One woman recites a rhythmic verse that you can't quite catch word for word, something about guarding bodies from invasive spirits. Another hums a haunting melody, which reminds you of something you heard in the forum, but here it's more focused, more intense. Historians still argue whether such household rituals were truly official religious practices or informal gatherings of folk tradition that spread from one family to another over generations. The debate might never be settled, partly because records from everyday domestic life are sparse. Still, you can easily imagine how these incantations bring solace. Illness, be it a cold or something more serious, feels frighteningly arbitrary. A whispered plea to a household deity, combined with a swirl of pungent smoke, gives one the sense of control, however fleeting. Lured by the music, you drift nearer until someone in the group notices you. She motions you closer, smiling kindly, as if to say, "Don't be shy." You join the perimeter, letting the low chanting vibrate through your chest. It's surprisingly calming, almost like a lullaby. In a city as large and bustling as Rome, pockets of devotion can spring up anywhere. An alley, a courtyard, a tucked-away corner of a busy street. Each of these small gatherings reflects the empire's spiritual mosaic. Some might worship an official Roman deity like Jupiter or Minerva, while others quietly hold on to older, more esoteric rites brought in from conquered lands. One of the women breaks away from the group and offers you a small pouch. Through its thin fabric, you feel something soft, like crushed leaves or maybe dried flowers. You raise an eyebrow, and she murmurs that it's a healing sachet, meant to be tied to the bedpost to ward off night terrors and the sniffles. Quirky or fringe tidbit? Absolutely. You half expect it to smell like thyme and rosemary, but when you bring it to your nose, you catch a whiff of something more exotic. Maybe frankincense or myrrh, imported from the east. Whether or not it'll cure a cold, it's undeniably a thoughtful gesture. You whisper thanks, tucking the sachet into your belt for safekeeping. Leaving the shrine behind, you meander through a colonnade that leads to a small side street. Faint orange light spills from a wide doorway, a temple, or perhaps a private worship space. Once inside, you see a statue of a minor deity, possibly linked to fertility or the harvest. You aren't entirely sure. Offerings of fruit and grain lie at the statue's feet, and the air is tinged with the sharp scent of incense. A young priest or acolyte stands nearby, quietly reciting verses in Latin. From the corner of your eye, you notice a small side table covered in neat rows of clay tablets. On each tablet are inscriptions, prayers, requests, sometimes even medical pleas. People leave them hoping the deity in question will see to it that they're granted relief. As you approach, you see half of them mention fevers, coughs, or general sickness. It's like a stack of prescription notes from an ancient pharmacy, except the pharmacist in this case is divine. You read a few lines, "Please relieve my son's burning throat," or "Let my wife recover from her cough before the harvest." Some are more desperate, pledging a greater offering if the ailment disappears. Others are heartbreakingly simple, just the name of a loved one and the word health. It's a somber reminder that beneath all the pomp and quirks, real suffering underpins these prayers. At that moment, the acolyte glances your way, as though you're intruding on sacred space. You step back, noticing how the temple's columns are painted in fading colors. The warmth of the torchlight makes the illusions come alive, bright oranges, reds, and blues that must have been dazzling centuries ago. Now, the effect is subdued but still captivating. The hush in here is palpable, and for a moment, you stand still, letting yourself sink into the calm. In such silence, you can almost believe that a whispered prayer has the power to dispel the sniffles. Eventually, you quietly slip out, returning to the open air. A comedic thought pops into your head. If you combined every Roman incantation and prayer for colds into one epic poem, it might be longer than the Aeneid. Granted, that might be your modern cynicism talking, but given all the gods and rituals on display, it's not too far-fetched. You pass by another courtyard, where a small statue of Jupiter stands. Someone has hung a wreath around Jupiter's neck, presumably to curry favor. Maybe they're hoping the king of gods can keep their chest congestion at bay. As you continue, you think back to the physician you saw earlier. He and others like him devote their lives to the physical side of healing therapies, surgeries, and the humoral approach. But in Rome, that's only half the story. The other half belongs to faith, prayer, and incantations. A testament to how the empire's pragmatic side coexists with its deep-seated reverence for the divine. For some, a physician's advice is incomplete without a temple visit. For others, an offering to a god is just a flourish on top of a physician's prescription. The synergy isn't always logical, but it's undoubtedly Roman. You hear the distant toll of a bell, indicating that time marches on. The night's grip is loosening, and the city's quiet corners begin to stir. Perhaps a handful of early risers are lighting lamps, preparing bread, or just fighting insomnia. You realize you've become part of the tapestry, another soul drifting through ancient streets, soaking in every hush, every hushed word, every hush remedy. You pause at a crossroads, uncertain which way to explore next. One direction leads to a grander district, where wealthy patricians might keep private physicians on retainer. Another route spirals into lower income blocks, where people rely more on communal wisdom and whispered incantations. But no matter which path you choose, you're certain to uncover more about this odd Roman remedy you keep hearing about. A cure that seems to straddle the boundary between real medicine and downright absurdity. You smile to yourself, stepping forward with renewed curiosity, half expecting the next corner to reveal a sign reading, "Strange elixirs this way." In Rome, that wouldn't be out of place. You drift onward, the hush of the late night turning into that peculiar stillness just before dawn. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster tries to belt out a wake-up call, but it sounds half-hearted. Perhaps the bird, too, isn't fully convinced it's time to rise. You pause at the threshold of a narrow stone passage where a sign dangles overhead, faintly squeaking in the breeze. By the glow of a flickering lamp, you discern faded letters that might read, "Apothecar." An apothecary shop. You've stumbled onto a place that might just hold the key to the strangest remedy you've heard whispers about. Cracking the door open, you find a cramped interior lit by a single oil lamp on a cluttered table. Rows of clay jars, vials, and wooden boxes line every surface, each labeled in spidery Latin script. It smells like a mishmash of sulfur, rosemary, and an unidentifiable funk that suggests someone might have been storing wet socks in here since Julius Caesar was a teenager. Behind the table, a tall, wary man fusses with a mortar and pestle. He doesn't glance up as you enter. Instead, he mutters about needing just one more dash of donkey's salt. You stifle a laugh. Donkey's salt. Is that a real thing, or just an unfortunate mistranslation? You clear your throat, and he finally looks up. His gaze flickers over you as if assessing whether you're truly seeking a cure or just a curious wanderer. When you mention you've heard rumors of an odd remedy for colds, his eyes gleam. "Oh, you want the real stuff," he says, barely containing a grin. He sets the mortar aside and shuffles to the back of the shop, rummaging through a chest that groans in protest. You brace yourself for something questionable, like the tail of a newt or the whiskers of a cat. Instead, he returns with a small packet wrapped in wax cloth. Holding it up reverently, he proclaims, "This is what you seek, the great Roman cure." He peels back a corner of the cloth, revealing a dark, crumbly substance. You stare at it, waiting for an explanation. Perhaps it's dried beetroot or pressed herbs. With great seriousness, he clarifies, crocodile dung, dried and mixed with honey. It takes you a moment to realize he's not joking. Your eyebrows shoot up so high, you're pretty sure they nearly detach from your face. If you had been casually sipping water, you'd have sprayed it across the room in a classic comedic spit take. He goes on to detail how a pinch of this mixture, dissolved in warm wine or steeped in hot water, is rumored to soothe a sore throat, clear a stuffy nose, and maybe even ward off the evil eye while it's at it. Your first instinct is to question his sanity, who decided that crocodile dung might be beneficial in any way for a head cold. But the apothecary stands firm, launching into the scientific basis of his claims. He explains that crocodiles, being creatures that bask under the sun, carry the warmth of Egypt within them, and thus their waste is imbued with properties that repel the chill humors. Listening to him might be more entertaining than any stage play. You do your best not to burst into giggles. Sure, you know Roman creativity can be unbound, but this is next level. By the time he's finished extolling the virtues of this special blend, you're torn between squeamish disbelief and genuine curiosity. The apothecary insists the practice arrived via merchants who traded along the Nile. A mainstream historical fact is that Rome, at the height of its power, controlled Egypt and had an extensive network of trade routes that brought in exotic spices, grains, and evidently random crocodile by-products. Quirky or fringe tidbit? Absolutely. The notion that this dung, honey concoction can cure colds is certainly on the fringe side, if not entirely off the map. But you can see how it might capture the Roman imagination. It's exotic. It's from a fearsome beast, and it apparently has an air of Egyptian mystique. The apothecary confides that some folks combine it with powdered date pits and a dash of vinegar for an extra kick. He even shares a time he gave a sample to a senator's wife, who swore her lingering cough vanished the same night. Of course, you suspect that might have more to do with powerful placebos than actual medical efficacy. Historians still argue whether the Romans sincerely believed such bizarre formulas worked, or whether these cures were largely speculative ventures that survived on anecdotal success stories. After all, a single recovery, whether coincidental or not, might catapult a remedy into local legend. Before you can respond, he holds the packet closer to your face. An earthy smell, part sweet honey, part pungent musk, assaults your nostrils. You try not to recoil too visibly. "Go on, take a whiff," he says. "If you find it pleasing, that's a sign it'll work for you." You're not entirely sure what to do. In a moment of comedic self-consciousness, you stammer something about needing time to consider. He lowers his hand, nodding as though he's just imparted the secrets of the universe. "Well," he says, "I won't pressure you, but you won't find many shops in Rome that carry the real deal." You thank him politely and step back toward the door. He rattles off a final pitch. "For a few denarii, I'll throw in a free sachet of Dormus whiskers to ward off migraines." You muster a cautious grin, mentally filing that away under strangest upsell in history, then slip outside, gulping the fresher air. In the alley, dawn's pale light starts to stretch across the sky, washing the city in soft shades of blue and grey. So that's it. The bizarre remedy that's had the local gossips whispering is quite literally crocodile dung. You can hardly believe it's real, yet you just saw it with your own eyes. Shaking your head in disbelief, you wander along a row of arches. A mild grin tugs at your lips as you imagine going back to your modern world and someone sneezing next to you. Would you ever lean over and say, "Hey, have you tried the crocodile honey thing? The Romans swore by it." Even in an empire known for its engineering genius, there's no shortage of outlandish ideas. But let's face it, if you were desperate enough, stuffed up and miserable, you might give it a shot, one comedic attempt, just to say you've done it. Around the corner, you spot a small fountain, its trickle more vibrant now in the early morning hush. You rinse your hands, thinking about the day ahead in ancient Rome. Some folks might be out shopping, others heading to the baths, and a few might be marching into an apothecary to purchase a certain pungent powder. Meanwhile, official doctors might be preparing their more sober treatments, herbal infusions, steam therapy, or even bloodletting, which was sometimes used to balance the humors. The notion that removing a bit of blood would help you fight a cold seems nearly as outlandish as crocodile dung, but at least it's part of a systematic, if flawed, theory. You find yourself chuckling softly as you imagine a trio of Roman friends comparing notes. I tried donkey, liver broth, but it only made me sneeze more. Oh, you should go for crocodile dung. Knock my cold out in 3 days! Ha! 3 days? I forced my slaves to wave fresh pine branches at me all night long, and I was fine by morning. The competition for the strangest remedy could fill entire amphitheaters with comedic retellings. In the distance, you hear the clang of metal gates being lifted. The city is waking. You're not exactly sure what to do with the revelation you've uncovered. Part of you wants to shout from the rooftops. They're using crocodile dung for colds. Another part recognizes that, for the Romans, this is just one more intriguing possibility among many. You recall how an empire this vast thrives on novelty. From exotic animals in the Colosseum to weird dishes in lavish banquets, Roman culture often embraces the out of the ordinary. So why not exotic substances for medicine? You continue your slow meander, letting the city's early morning bustle wash over you. Street vendors set up their stands, donkey carts roll by, and the first wave of chatter rises in the crisp air. You wonder if the senator's wife, who supposedly found relief with that odd mixture, is somewhere nearby, sipping her morning honey, wine, feeling triumphant about her donkey, salt-infused remedy. You figure that whatever the truth behind its efficacy, the story is half the cure. If enough people believe in it, maybe that belief alone has some curative power. For now, you tuck the knowledge away, a secret you carry in your back pocket should you ever need a party trick. Well, a cold remedy trick. More like, as the sun's rays finally crest the rooftops, you feel a subtle warmth return to your limbs. The night's mysteries are still fresh in your memory, prayers, incantations, debates over humors, and that singular apothecary who proudly displayed the weirdest medicinal ingredient you've ever encountered. You smile, stepping into the gentle light of a new day. If Rome has taught you anything, it's that the line between reason and absurdity is surprisingly thin. And sometimes, to find relief, whether spiritual or physical, you simply need to suspend disbelief, at least for a little while. Daylight slowly gains ground, unveiling Rome's bustling streets in a soft, golden hue. The gentle clatter of carts and the shuffle of wary feet replaces the hush of night. As you pass along a row of buildings, you catch a warm, earthy scent drifting on the air, like crushed mint leaves, with a faint undercurrent of savory herbs. It beckons you forward, promising a gentler side of Roman medicine, far removed from exotic dung-based concoctions. Ahead, a narrow lane opens into a charming courtyard framed by ivy-laden walls and potted plants of every imaginable variety. Several women and a few men, each dressed in practical tunics, are tending to rows of green stalks, snipping leaves with small knives and carefully bundling them. They pause occasionally to exchange tips on combining different herbs to achieve just the right effect. One of them, noticing your curious gaze, waves you closer, smiling in a way that invites you to join their quiet gathering. "Grab a basket," she says, pointing to a stack of woven containers at the courtyard's edge. You oblige, stepping over to pick one up. The group clearly knows their botany. They discuss how thyme soothes digestion, how sage fortifies the throat, how mint freshens the breath and supposedly clears the head. You inhale deeply, letting the fragrant oils swirl in your nostrils, a bracing wake-up call far more pleasant than a whiff of crocodile dung. After a night of shadowy alleys and whispered rumors, the morning's greenery feels almost magical, as though you've stepped into a secret apothecary garden. As you join the others in carefully plucking and sorting the leaves, your host explains that local flora have always played a vital role in Roman medicinal brews. Many of these herbs, like rosemary, oregano, and basil, double as culinary staples, making them readily available for impromptu remedies when a sniffle hits. The Romans are practical that way. Use it for seasoning tonight's stew. Use it for healing tomorrow's cough. One mainstream historical fact highlights the importance of herb gardens in ancient Roman villas. The wealthy would dedicate entire plots to cultivating medicinal plants, some of which they believed could cure everything from headaches to heartbreak. Though good luck verifying that last one. You watch as a young man in the group takes handfuls of bright green leaves and tosses them into a clay pot with water that's just begun to steam over a small brazier. A swirl of steam rises, carrying the combined aromas of thyme, mint, and a pinch of lavender. He explains that this infusion is helpful for clearing out congestion. Breathe it in, and let the vapors reach your lungs. he says. The group nods in agreement, each person recounting a time they used a similar steam bath to combat the early signs of a cold. Someone cracks a joke about how steam inhalation is the best way to look glamorous when you're a sniffling mess. Just drape a cloth over your head and the bowl, and you'll feel like you're in a miniature spa. Another member playfully counters that the last time she tried that, she almost dunked her entire face in scalding water. You chuckle at the image. Apparently, comedic mishaps know no error. At least it smells better than the dung-laced honey potion you stumbled upon hours ago. The conversation flows freely as the group shares stories of herbal triumphs and misadventures. A wiry-haired woman mentions how she once mixed too much pennyroyal into a brew and ended up with a headache more fierce than the cold she was trying to cure. Someone else teases her, "Next time, measure twice, brew once." It's light-hearted, but it underscores that even natural remedies can have side effects if used carelessly. The Romans may not know about chemical compounds in the modern sense, but experience has taught them to treat potent herbs with respect. Nearby, an older man demonstrates how to crush dried leaves into a fine powder using a mortar and pestle. He urges you to have a go, so you take a turn. The repetitive motion is oddly soothing, as if each grind is a gentle lull for your senses. The soft rasp of the pestle feels calming after the bustling night. You watch green-brown flecks spiral within the bowl. Occasionally, you catch a whiff of pungent fennel seed or a swirl of camphor from rosemary stems. "Don't forget to add a pinch of salt," he says, winking. He claims it helps bind the flavors together. Plus, the Romans love salt nearly as much as they love telling outlandish stories about donkey whiskers and phoenix tears. Before long, you have a small stash of finely crushed herbs. "Perfect for a hot tisane," someone remarks. "Just steep it in boiling water and drink it down when it's warm." Works wonders on a scratchy throat. As you listen, you reflect on how different this approach is from the crocodile dung cure. But then again, Romans don't see these remedies as contradictory. They might combine a pleasant herbal infusion with a prayer at a temple or even, perish the thought, try a pinch of that bizarre dung mixture if the sniffles persist. Their approach to wellness is more of a buffet than a single entree. And who are you to argue with variety? One of the group members, a tall woman with a wreath of braided hair, leads you to a table where various sachets of blended herbs are laid out. She points to each in turn, describing its potential benefit. This one has sage mint and a hint of licorice root, ideal for clearing nasal passages. Another sachet includes lavender, chamomile, and lemon balm, good for relaxation and mild insomnia, something everyone occasionally battles in a bustling city. She confides a quirky tidbit. If you hang a sachet of lavender and chamomile around your neck at night, some say you'll dream of your true love. You stifle a laugh, thinking it might be more likely you'll smell like a flower shop. In a lull of conversation, an elderly gardener standing nearby chimes in about the historical seeds that found their way into Roman soil. "We got coriander from the east, dill from Greek lands," he says proudly, "and they all took root here." He gestures around at the riot of greenery that thrives in the courtyard. "Sometimes," he adds with a grin, "I think the only reason these herbs grow so well is that they heard how good Roman manure is." For a second, your mind flashes back to that crocodile dung scenario. Manure indeed. You quickly refocus on the aromatic, less revolting side of gardening. The group eventually sits down around a wooden table. They set out cups and a large jug of heated water, letting you sample the different herb blends. It feels like you've stumbled into a mini tea party. The first sip is invigorating, bright with a menthol punch from crushed mint and rosemary. The second is more comforting, layered with chamomile's sweet calm. By the time you taste the third, a blend featuring thyme and licorice root, your sinus passages are practically giving a standing ovation. You joke that if modern coffee shops existed, they'd have nothing on this courtyard's menu. While you drink, talk turns to the age-old question of whether these herbal infusions truly expedite healing, or if they merely provide psychological comfort. Historians still argue whether the perceived medicinal benefits of certain Roman herbal brews were purely placebo. A few ancient texts rave about the potency of local flora, while others remain skeptical, attributing recovery to the patient's overall constitution or a random quirk of timing. Yet, as the steam curls around your nose and the taste of mint spreads across your tongue, you find it hard to be cynical. Sometimes, belief and a little warmth might be just what the doctor ordered. A soft breeze stirs the courtyard, rustling leaves and carrying with it the promise of midday sun. The group rises, returning to their tasks, some bottling freshly dried herbs, others tidying the scattered pots. You realize that for them, this is an everyday routine, not a special ritual. They wake, tend their plants, brew their teas, and trust that nature provides at least a portion of what they need to stay healthy. Of course, they also know that if a cold does strike, they have a medley of options, from practical steam inhalation to downright questionable crocodile dung solutions. As you hand the empty teacup back, the tall woman thanks you for sharing in their morning routine. She presses a small sachet of thyme and mint into your hand. "For the road," she says. Her eyes sparkle with genuine warmth. You tuck it away, reflecting on the evening you've had, a meandering journey that began in hushed darkness and has now led you to a bright courtyard alive with green, fragrant life. The city of Rome, it seems, is a mosaic of approaches to well-being. Some are steeped in reason, others in ritual, and still others in the downright bizarre. Should you feel a tingle in your throat later, you can always brew the sachet you just received. A simpler, certainly more appetizing remedy than croc dung, you think wryly. That memory still makes you wriggle your nose. But hey, at least you've discovered a softer side of Roman healing. One that's fragrant, calming, and surprisingly communal. With an appreciative nod to your new herbalist friends, you step out of the courtyard and into the ever-awakening streets. The aromas of thyme and mint cling to you, and in that comforting swirl of scents, you carry a piece of Rome's ancient wisdom along for the rest of the day. Stepping back onto the main thoroughfare, you drift along with the city's morning traffic. The gentle hum of conversation rises with each new street, and before long, you find yourself at the entrance of a sprawling marketplace. The Roman day is in full swing here. Vendors unload crates from donkey-drawn carts, while shoppers jockey for position at the best stalls. Just beyond a massive archway, bright awnings ripple in a breeze, revealing row after row of stalls laden with goods. You catch the scent of frying onions and fresh bread mingling with the tang of salted fish. It's an energetic swirl of color, smell, and sound, an entirely different world from last night's hushed alleys. You pause near a stall displaying an astonishing variety of dried herbs, everything from basil to something labeled beer's garlic. The stall owner, a silver, bearded man in a slightly stained toga, beckons you closer with a sales pitch you can't quite ignore. Are your sinuses giving you trouble? A pinch of bear's garlic will clear them out in no time. His theatrical wink suggests he's either supremely confident in his product or just desperate to make a sale. You can't help but smile, remembering the pleasant herbal courtyard from earlier. Maybe bear's garlic is just the next miracle, remedy waiting to impress or disappoint. Past this herb stall, the market opens into a kaleidoscope of activity. Merchants hawk everything from spiced wine to intricately carved wooden amulets. A cluster of shoppers gathers around a young woman, displaying bright red pomegranates and plump figs, their sweet tang wafting through the air. Across from her, a wiry merchant with leathered skin peddles pungent fish sauce, garum, stored in large clay amphorae. You watch as he pours a sample into a small dish, encouraging a skeptic to take a sip. The man's expression says it all: shock, then grudging acceptance. You stifle a grin, thinking that fish sauce might be a formidable enough odor to clear anyone's stuffy nose. Your attention shifts to a corner stall brimming with exotic wares. Hanging from a wooden beam are bundles of cinnamon sticks, bright saffron threads in glass vials, lumps of frankincense, and dried petals of what appears to be hibiscus. One mainstream historical fact jumps out: the Romans maintained extensive trade routes that brought spices from far-flung lands like India, Arabia, and even parts of Africa. It's no surprise that the city's apothecaries and would-be doctors flock here, hoping to find the next secret ingredient for the ultimate cure-all. As you wander closer, you see a parchment sign propped up: rare ingredients for good health. Discount today? The merchant, wearing a neatly trimmed beard and a foreign-style tunic, greets you with an enthusiastic bow. He gestures to a glass jar filled with a dark amber resin. Fresh from the caravans, he boasts. Steep it for a cough, or burn it to ward off evil spirits. He picks up another jar containing what looks like small, shriveled berries, juniper, to open the lungs, he says, swirling them about with pride. You can't help but be impressed by his salesman's flair. At the same time, you wonder which of these items might end up blended with honey and, heaven forbid, crocodile dung for the next bizarre cold remedy. A donkey brays loudly a few stalls away, providing an unintentionally comedic soundtrack. You turn to see a harried merchant trying to coax the stubborn animal into moving forward. It's laden with sacks labeled dates from Judea and ginger from the Far East. The donkey, however, appears unmoved by the merchant's pleas. A small crowd has gathered to offer unhelpful advice. Try speaking Greek to it. Or maybe it prefers a different harness. You snicker at the donkey's unwavering stance, suspecting that nothing short of a full buffet of carrots will persuade it. One onlooker jokes that donkey's sweat, if collected properly, is rumored to cure rashes. You've heard enough outlandish claims lately to not be entirely surprised. Continuing down the row, you notice a cluster of stalls selling dried leaves and seeds you can't readily identify. You approach one stall, eyeing a sign that simply reads, "Exotic powders." The merchant, a stout fellow with a booming laugh, claims each pouch has a story. "This one," he says, lifting a small bag, "comes from the bark of a sacred tree in Nubia. Locals say it can banish fevers." He sets it down and points to another powder, pale green in color, allegedly gleaned from the roots of a serpent's favorite plant. He waggles his eyebrows suggestively, as if the name alone should impress you. Quirky or fringe tidbit, absolutely. You half expect him to declare it cures heartbreak, receding hairlines, and the common cold all at once. A few stalls over, you spot earthen jars arranged in neat rows, each labeled with elegant cursive. You approach to find a middle-aged woman with an air of quiet authority. She sees you eyeing her wares and explains, "Essential oils, Roman style. We extract them by steeping flowers and herbs in oil, then pressing the mixture. It's slow work, but worth it." She offers you a sample, an amber-colored oil that smells of roses and mint. Her claim, dab a few drops on your temples to soothe your headache, or rub it onto your chest to ease congestion. The floral notes swirl around you, and for a moment, you imagine yourself floating in a spa rather than a bustling ancient marketplace. As you linger, the murmur of negotiation surrounds you. A young woman tries to haggle for saffron, insisting she needs it for her mother's special soup that allegedly cures everything from head colds to heartbreak. A rowdy pair of travelers from distant provinces competes to buy the largest chunk of frankincense, each bragging about how they'll resell it for double elsewhere. It's a colorful tapestry of commerce, curiosity, and occasionally comedic desperation. That's life in Roma if you have the coin. There's always someone eager to sell you hope in a jar, or in a donkey's harness, if you ask the right person. Peaced. You hear from a shadowy corner near a stack of amphorae. You glance over to see a man discreetly lifting a sack that appears to contain dried lizards' skins. "Very potent," he whispers. "If you brew it with vinegar. Clears the throat, guaranteed." You raise an eyebrow, recalling how the city thrives on such hush trades. Historians still argue whether half of these exotic cures were genuine or little more than cunning fabrications, capitalizing on Rome's appetite for novelty. You suspect the line between serious medicine and opportunistic trickery is thinner than a saffron thread. Farther in, you come across a traveling caravan set up in the heart of the market. Camels, an unusual sight in Rome, lounge lazily by the side, while a cluster of onlookers marvel at these ships of the desert. The caravan's goods are arranged in a flamboyant display, bright textiles, carved ivory, and containers of vibrant spices. You notice small metal boxes with intricate etchings. Curious, you peer inside one to find a black, tar-like substance. The merchant claims it's mummia, a mysterious import that some in the ancient world believed had medicinal properties because it derived, supposedly, from Egyptian mummies. You stifle an internal scream. Crocodile dung was one thing, but powdered mummy, that's a horror story waiting to happen. Yet the merchant insists it's the secret to eternal youth. Let's face it, you're hardly convinced. Just then, you spot a sign that makes you grin. Genuine unicorn horn. Rare! A tall merchant with flamboyant gestures is showcasing a long, spiral tusk that might be from a narwhal, but it's definitely not from a mythical horned horse. He's telling a wide-eyed audience that just a small scraping from this horn can fend off any illness, including the dreaded common cold. You watch the performance unfold, equal parts impressed by his salesmanship and amused at the absurdity. No shortage of creativity here. A donkey brays again. Whether it's the same one as before, who knows? The noise somehow underscores the lively chaos of Roman commerce. You step aside as a group of legionaries marches by, possibly headed for a quick snack before their duties. They pay little attention to the bizarre merchandise. They've likely seen it all in their travels across the empire. One soldier tosses a coin to a fruit vendor, snags an apple, and continues without breaking stride. Efficiency at its finest. Wandering through these stalls, you realize how easily a cunning mind can spin a story about any ingredient. If you're desperate enough, sleep-deprived, nose-dripping, throat aching, maybe you'd buy a pinch of serpent, root powder, or a shaving of alleged unicorn horn. On the other hand, you might prefer the simpler path: snag some thyme, brew a comforting tea, and rest up. Yet, The quest for a miraculous fix lingers in the air. The Romans, for all their engineering and administrative brilliance, remain delightfully open to the improbable. A bit of that spirit sneaks into your own heart as you stroll, imagining how each exotic spice or odd resin might transform into a cure. Eventually, you find yourself at the edge of the marketplace, the swirl of noise and color receding behind you. A cart trundles by, loaded with sacks of grain. You run a mental tally of the day's revelations: bears garlic, donkey standoffs, so-called unicorn horns, and an entire aisle of questionable powders. If there's one thing you've learned, it's that Romans never stop searching for remedies, no matter how strange or improbable. They gather, they debate, they buy, and they experiment. And in that constant motion of trade and curiosity, new cures, both legitimate and outrageous, take shape. You give one last, long look at the bustling stalls, feeling the sun's warmth on your back. Time to move on, carrying the aroma of spices and the echoes of bartering voices with you. The city's restless quest for the perfect fix continues without pause, an endless parade of donkey carts, exotic caravans, and cunning shopkeepers. It's oddly comforting. Like if you need something, anything, Rome will find a way to provide. Even if that something is crocodile dung sweetened with honey. You whisper a final goodbye to the marketplace, stepping forward to see what else this empire of endless surprises has in store. Midday finds you weaving past another knot of streets, guided by snippets of conversation that hint at yet another caravan's arrival. You follow the chatter of merchants and curious bystanders until you land in a wide, sunlit square near one of Rome's lesser, used gates. Camels, mules, and a few packhorses stand idly, their handlers unloading cargo under the watchful eye of city inspectors. The heat radiates off the stones, and you find yourself squinting at the shimmering air, trying to catch a glimpse of the odd cures rumored to be hidden among more mundane trade goods. A tall, broad-shouldered trader in a dusty cloak barks orders to his crew. Around him, crates and barrels are piled precariously, some labeled with foreign scripts you can't decipher. You notice a battered trunk with intricate carvings, a swirl of snakes, and what looks like lotus flowers. One of the crew members cracks it open, revealing rows of small, corked vials glinting in the sunlight. Their contents range from golden liquids to coarse powders in shades of ochre, brown, and even a pale bluish hue that makes you suspiciously think of ground-up gemstones. You can't help but sidle closer, your curiosity piqued by the possibility that these might be the famed, exotic ointments you've heard about in the marketplace. People flock around in a semicircle, each hoping to get a first look or maybe snag a deal before the goods end up in the hands of established merchants. A few bold souls are already haggling for small pouches of what they claim is pure desert sand. That, when mixed with certain oils, can supposedly cure fungal infections. You hear a muffled cough from behind a nearby stack of barrels. Someone evidently fighting a scratchy throat, possibly their next in line for the snake, and Lotus Trunk's mysterious offerings. You recall your comedic experiences from earlier: donkey sweat, crocodile dung, donkey whiskers. So maybe desert sand isn't that big a leap. Over by the camel line, a stooped figure wearing a faded turban sells lumps of sticky resin. You step closer to examine them and notice they have a distinct piney aroma. He calls it dragon's blood, though you suspect that might be more marketing than fact. According to him, you can burn it for cleansing the air of bad spirits and swirling colds away. Quirky or fringe tidbit? Check. With how frequently colds and sniffles pop up in conversation around here, you imagine half of Rome might soon be shrouded in red-tinged smoke if they take his advice. Then again, there's a crowd forming around him, each face half intrigued, half worried they'll miss out on some miraculous cure. Nearby, a group of legionaries wanders through, curious about the odd spectacle. One of them cracks a joke about how if these traveling merchants can cure sore throats, maybe they can do something about the state of the latrines at his military outpost. Another soldier retorts that no ointment in the world can handle that stench. The small group erupts into laughter, a brief comedic break in an otherwise intense swirl of commerce. You manage a smile, reminded yet again of how Romans, from soldiers to senators, never miss a chance to sprinkle humor into daily life. An older merchant with a neatly trimmed beard calls you over to his spread of ointments and potions. Each is stored in little clay pots bearing symbols you don't recognize. He claims these come from a hidden oasis beyond Egypt's borders, where shamans have unlocked the secrets of blending desert herbs with the milk of wild goats. You resist the urge to chuckle at the idea of a wild goat oasis. The merchant's pitch is dramatic enough. One dab behind each ear, and your cold will be gone within a day. 2 dabs, and you might even see visions of your ancestors. You can't decide if that's meant as a selling point or a warning. Still, his animated gestures and thick accent add to the atmosphere of novelty that pervades the square. You recall one mainstream historical fact: Roman roads crisscrossed the empire, linking everything from the British Isles to the gates of the Sahara. This extensive network enabled caravans to roll into the capital loaded with treasures, curiosities, and sometimes questionable cures. It's no wonder that each corner of Rome can unveil something new, especially for locals desperate to outsmart a persistent cough or headache. Historians still argue whether some of these far-flung trade anecdotes are exaggerated. Were caravans really carting exotic potions by the trunkful, or did the majority of them just carry grain, textiles, and pottery, with the occasional crate of spices? The truth likely lies in between, yet the allure of rare cures remains strong, fueled by stories passed from one merchant to another, until they become half legend, half sales pitch. A camel snorts loudly, startling you just as you lean in to smell one of the merchant's potions. You jerk back, nearly knocking into another customer. He teeters but recovers, and you both share a brief, sheepish laugh. The merchant scolds the camel, muttering something in a language you don't recognize. Yet you feel it might translate to, "Behave, or you'll end up in tomorrow's stew." A second quick snort from the camel suggests the feeling is mutual. Another comedic moment in the swirl of trade. Eager to see more, you move along to a cluster of peddlers near the back, each hawking small clay tablets or wax-sealed jars. One man brandishes a scroll covered in elaborate script. He proclaims it contains the divine recipe for a universal antidote. "Yours for a fraction of its worth," he insists, unrolling a snippet to show a baffling mixture of symbols. The crowd looks on skeptically, but a few folks inch closer. One woman in a worn cloak asks if it can cure insomnia, as well as the common cold. The man strokes his chin theatrically. "My friend, if this does not put you to sleep, nothing on earth will." The double meaning lingers, and you stifle a giggle. Maybe that's a threat or a hyperbole. You're not entirely sure. You wonder if the flux of traveling caravans helps or hinders local physicians. On one hand, new ingredients could expand their repertoire. On the other, unscrupulous peddlers might undermine genuine medical practice by promoting sensational cures that overshadow the tried and true. A middle-aged bystander in a plain tunic nudges you, whispering conspiratorially that many doctors resent these caravans, seeing them as competition. "They want us to trust in humors, not miracle sands," he jokes. But then he shrugs. Still, can't hurt to try something new. In a city where engineering feats coexist with superstitious rituals, the door to experimentation is wide open, especially if it promises relief from a cough or the drips. As you mosey on, a donkey pulling a small cart laden with clay jars comes into view. Yet another corner of this marketplace. The cart's owner calls out, "Ointments to invigorate the soul." You almost expect him to hawk donkey whiskers next, but instead, he lifts a jar labeled with a scribble that might read, "Aloe extract." The thick, gel-like substance inside is tinted green, and he claims it's been infused with desert minerals to combat dryness of the throat. You know aloe is often prized for soothing skin, but dryness of the throat, that's a new one. Roman creativity truly knows no bounds. The day marches on, and the heat grows. You catch fragments of deals being made, coins clinking in purses, and the occasional grumble from a city inspector telling traders to move along if they lack proper permits. The swirling dust under the caravan animals' hooves makes the air gritty, and you can almost taste the tang of foreign spice. You realize you've learned a great deal from these traveling merchants about how cures, legitimate, dubious, or purely fanciful, make their way into Roman consciousness. They arrive with as much ceremony as new fashion trends, and with an air of mystique that enthralls the city's imagination. At last, the caravan seems to settle, with some merchants finding lodging or space in local stalls. Others trot off, presumably to hawk their wares in different corners of this vast metropolis. You sense that in a matter of days, the city's apothecaries will display new powders and ointments on their shelves, boasting of their exotic origins and guaranteed potency. Word of mouth will do the rest. Eager folks will line up, hoping to snag the magic bullet for their next sneeze or cough. Shaking off the dust, you exit the square, considering all you've seen. The donkey sweats, the dragon's blood resin, that battered trunk of unknown vials, each a testament to how a place like Rome effortlessly merges the practical with the improbable. Whether or not these caravans genuinely deliver cures or merely tall tales, they keep the empire's appetite for novelty well fed. And, maybe buried within the hype, one or two solutions actually do some good. After all, If you can't trust a dusty crate of powders from a caravan that's traveled thousands of miles, what can you trust? With a tired but amused sigh, you slip back into the crowded streets, the caravans receding behind you. The city's hum instantly envelops you again, but a part of you remains in that sunlit square, imagining all the curatives and claims drifting away, off to new corners of Rome, where someone, sniffling and hopeful, might just buy in. You leave the clamor of merchants and exotic caravans behind, feeling the midday heat settle on your shoulders. The warmth reminds you of something else the Romans truly adore: baths. If you've heard any rumors about this city, you know their bathhouses are as central to life as bread and circuses. Considering your ongoing investigation into cold remedies, you recall that many Romans swear by a good long soak or a stint in the steam room to ward off the sniffles. Intrigued and maybe a bit overheated, you decide it's time for a first-hand look at one of these famed establishments. A short walk brings you to an impressive complex towering brick walls, arches framing large doorways, and a continuous buzz of conversation drifting from within. This is no mere bath, it's practically a mini-city. You step inside the grand entrance to find a bustling lobby with marble floors. The subtle scent of perfumed oils mingles with the earthy tang of warm stone. Patrons shuffle around in various states of undress. Some fully clothed, others draped in towels, none seeming the least bit self-conscious. A sign posted near the entrance in polished bronze letters reads, "Therma, open to all." Indeed, Roman bathhouses welcome just about everyone, from highborn senators to regular citizens. A friendly attendant, a wiry fellow with a cheerful grin, notices your curious gaze. He shows you where to store your belongings, pointing to rows of small cubbies, each guarded by a watchful slave who's quick to keep an eye on everything. Once you've shed your outer garments, you follow a steady stream of bathers through a broad corridor, decorated with mosaics depicting dolphins, sea monsters, and tridents. A hum of relaxed chatter envelops you, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter. It's like a social club, except everyone's wearing sandals or wooden clogs, and the main event is cleansing rather than dancing. The corridor opens into a massive hall known as the frigidarium, the cool bath area. Rays of sunlight pour in from high windows, illuminating a large, rectangular pool of shimmering water. Several bathers lounge at the edges, chatting idly. You dip a hand in, refreshing, but not quite cold enough to chill your bones. In typical Roman fashion, the frigidarium is beautifully designed, with marble statues of nymphs and sea gods perched around the pool. One mainstream historical fact stands out: these sprawling bathhouse complexes often featured advanced heating systems called hypocausts, furnaces that circulated hot air beneath the floors to regulate the temperature in different rooms. It's a testament to Roman ingenuity, blending engineering with a love for leisurely wellness. A bather next to you sneezes, loudly. After the echo dies, he gives you a sheepish grin and jokes, "That's what I get for skipping the coldarium." You grin back, deciding you'd rather start with warmth anyway. The man points you to a doorway on the left, and you head in that direction, passing a side chamber where an attendant ladles fragrant oil onto a marble slab. Someone is getting a thorough massage complete with a strigil, a curved metal tool used to scrape off oil and sweat. The scraping sound is oddly mesmerizing, though part of you wonders how comfortable it really is. Then again, it might be the Roman equivalent of a modern spa, minus the tinkly background music. Following the damp heat that wafts through the corridor, you enter the tepidarium, a warm room lined with benches. The temperature here is noticeably higher, and your skin immediately begins to glow with perspiration. A few folks recline on marble ledges, chatting as though they're at a casual dinner party. One woman gestures animatedly with her arms, explaining a remedy she tried mixing mustard seeds and honey, then rubbing it on her chest while in the steamy baths to draw out the chill. Quirky or fringe tidbit? Absolutely. Whether it works is anyone's guess, but she's adamant. Another bather chimes in that, if you combine that approach with a daily steam inhalation, you'll never miss a day of work. Even if your boss is a real slave driver, he jokes. As you move deeper into the bathhouse, the air grows thick with moisture, curling your hair and coating your skin in a fine sheen of sweat. Finally, you reach the coldarium, the hottest room. Clouds of steam swirl around a circular pool at its center, and marble pillars glisten with condensation. You find a spot on a bench carved into the wall, exhaling in relief as the heat sinks into your muscles. Conversation here is softer, punctuated by occasional coughs and sneezes. The very reason some folks come to sweat out whatever ails them. Historians still argue whether the Romans attributed actual curative properties to these hot rooms, or simply believed that, sweating it out, was a sign of good health. Either way, you see plenty of people who seem convinced that the coldarium does wonders for a pesky cough. A middle-aged man seated nearby nods at you, noticing you taking in the steamy scene. He launches into a casual explanation. I had a scratchy throat last week. Spent an hour here each day, drank plenty of Posca afterward, and I'm good as new. Posca, you recall, is a popular diluted vinegar drink favored by soldiers and laborers alike, often spiked with herbs. The man claims it kills any lingering sickness in his throat. Plus, he adds with a wink, no one wants to stand close to you when you smell like vinegar. Keeps the germs away. It's a comedic notion, but maybe not entirely lacking logic. If everyone else gives you a wide berth, you can at least recover in peace. From somewhere behind a pillar, you overhear a jovial debate about whether the steam purifies the soul, as well as the sinuses. One bather swears that combining the steam with repeated chants of an Egyptian mantra cures you faster, while another says, just come here, sweat, and for Jupiter's sake, blow your nose. The mix of practicality and superstition is on full display. You can't help but smile at the banter. This is Rome, where a man might consult the best Greek physician in the city, only to turn around and soak in a steamy bath, while chanting spells just in case. A slave carrying a bucket of water passes by, carefully pouring it onto heated stones at the corner of the room. A fresh cloud of steam billows up, and you close your eyes, letting the humidity wrap around you like a thick blanket. You inhale deeply, feeling the warm, moist air travel through your nostrils and into your chest. It's soothing, like an ancient precursor to modern steam therapy. The tension in your shoulders loosens, and you start to understand how someone might believe the bathhouse itself, with all its communal relaxation and cleansing routines, could chase away a minor cold. After a while, you decide you've cooked enough in the coldarium. You follow others through a side door that leads to a small courtyard. Here, you find a shallow pool of cool water, almost like a mini frigidarium for immediate contrast. You watch as bathers dip in, some with a yelp at the temperature difference, others with stoic acceptance. The sudden chill sparks your senses anew, and you feel your breath catch. A comedic thought flashes in your mind. If your nose was stuffy before, this shock of cold might definitely force it to clear. Once the initial gasp subsides, you lounge on the pool's edge, letting droplets of water trickle down your arms and legs, your body still radiating heat from the coldarium. Two women near you talk about a new cure they heard, something involving ground pepper, fennel seeds, and goat's milk, supposedly rubbed on the chest before entering the baths. One of them is skeptical, making a face that says, I'll stick to good old steam, thanks. The other shrugs, claiming that a friend of a friend tried it and felt better within hours. That's Rome in a nutshell. Rumor meets remedy meets personal anecdote. Eventually, you rise, feeling pleasantly tired but invigorated, like your lungs have been given a thorough spring cleaning. Before leaving, you pass through the massage area again. A strong-handed attendant offers to rub scented oil into your back. You almost decline, until you catch the aroma of lavender and rosemary. You recall how lavender was said to calm frayed nerves, and rosemary might help with respiratory issues. The result? A relaxing, lightly fragrant sheen that you suspect might further deter any cold that dares approach. With the day wearing on, you gather your belongings. In the reception hall, you notice a small corner stall where someone sells herbal soaps and perfumed sachets, each promising rejuvenation. You can't resist picking up a sachet, inhaling a bright citrus scent that tickles your nose. The vendor claims it's perfect to keep on your pillow at night to fend off colds and nightmares. You grin, thinking about the donkey's salt and crocodile dung from your earlier adventures. A perfumed sachet feels downright normal by comparison. Exiting the bathhouse, you step out into the street, feeling as though you've just awakened from a warm, water-lapped dream. Your skin tingles with the lingering heat, your muscles relaxed, and your senses sharpened. If the Romans are onto something, you might well have inoculated yourself against any lurking sniffles. You wander off with a satisfied smile, thoroughly impressed by the synergy of engineering, socializing, and simple steam therapy. Sure, there's no ironclad proof that it'll cure every cold, but it's hard to argue with how good you feel. At the very least, you've experienced one of the Empire's most cherished rituals, emerging rosy, cheeked and a little more open to the idea that sometimes the best remedy is simply a bit of warmth and relaxation. Roman style. You slip back into the winding streets of Rome, skin still tingling from the bathhouse's warmth. The afternoon sun has shifted, casting long shadows across the paving stones. Occasionally, a breeze rustles your freshly fragrant cloak, carrying lingering notes of rosemary and lavender to your nose. You feel oddly energized and decide to follow a handful of people heading toward a colonnaded square where, rumor has it, scholars meet to discuss everything from philosophical theories to medical breakthroughs. Here, you suspect you'll encounter contrasting opinions on that odd Roman cold remedy you've heard so much about, the dreaded crocodile dung mix. The square itself is framed by tall columns that gleam pale gold in the sunlight. Busts of past luminaries watch silently from niches set high in the walls. A smattering of people stands around in loose clusters, some in heated debate, others taking notes on wax tablets. One group catches your attention, a few older men wearing the austere robes of learned men, plus a couple of younger scribes who hang on every word. It's a scene that calls to mind the famous philosophical schools of Athens, except this is Rome, so the conversation might shift abruptly from grand ideas to the best way to get rid of head colds. You inch closer, pretending to study the relief carvings on a nearby column, hoping to overhear the discussion. Sure enough, one grey-haired scholar waves a scroll in the air, animatedly listing the ingredients of a remedy he claims is far more effective than that nonsense about donkey whiskers or crocodile dung. Another man bristles at the mention of dung, insisting that the Egyptians had medical knowledge that surpassed much of Rome's. Perhaps the mixture isn't so foolish, he argues. There may be some hidden property we've yet to discover. It's exactly the sort of debate you'd expect in a city that fancies itself the apex of civilization, yet remains open to foreign influences, especially when health is at stake. A middle-aged woman steps forward, adjusting her cloak. She's introduced as Tibulia, a traveling physician who studied in Alexandria. She's holding a small clay pot, lifting it for emphasis. Don't dismiss Egyptian remedies too quickly, she says. Some revolve around honey, which can certainly help soothe inflammation. Pair that with certain antibacterial properties in foreign clays or resins, and you might see results. Another scholar, arms folded, counters with a sardonic grin. But must we add crocodile droppings to the recipe? Surely we can substitute something else with less stench. A ripple of laughter runs through the group, but Tibulia stands firm, raising an eyebrow as if to say, "Don't knock it till you've tried it." A slender, serious-faced man, who identifies himself as Cassianus, interjects that the remedy's popularity might stem more from cultural fascination than medicinal fact. Historians still argue whether the Romans genuinely believed in the medicinal properties of such exotic ingredients, or if it was more of a status-driven novelty. He looks around, as though challenging anyone to refute him. After all, claiming to have the secrets of Egypt or the East confers a certain prestige. You feel a grin tugging at your lips. He has a point. A city that loves novelty will flock to anything labeled rare, no matter how outlandish. Yet, part of you recalls a mainstream historical fact. Rome had a long-standing tradition of gathering medical knowledge from conquered territories. Greece, Egypt, even parts of the Middle East. The famous Galen himself studied extensively across the Mediterranean before bringing his insights to Rome. So while donkey sweat and crocodile dung might provoke snickering, there's a kernel of genuine curiosity driving these debates. The conversation shifts gears. Someone references an older text that describes donkey liver poultices for chest congestion. Another cites the notion of inhaling the smoke of burnt donkey hair, a truly pungent choice, apparently meant to drive away malicious spirits lurking in the lungs. A younger scribe wrinkles his nose in disgust, while an older scholar nods thoughtfully, as if trying to recall a half-forgotten line from a medical treatise. Quirky, yes, says Tibulia with a shrug, but the boundary between magic and medicine often overlaps in these records. A hush falls as an imposing figure in a purple, trimmed toga strides into the circle. He's introduced as Lucius Petronius, known for his treatises on natural philosophy. He starts by referencing Hippocrates, praising the four-humor system and then systematically debunking flights of fancy in Roman medicine. We can no longer allow the masses to think donkey whiskers alone will banish a cold, he declares, adopting a grave tone. Our approach must be rooted in observation, experiment, and reason. If the rumored crocodile honey mixture works, we should test it in controlled settings. A few younger listeners nod eagerly, perhaps longing for a more systematic approach akin to modern scientific methods. Yet, an older scholar wearing an amulet shaped like an eye protests, but we cannot ignore the role of the gods and the intangible. Some cures, though they seem bizarre, may well harness forces beyond our immediate understanding. He points to his amulet. These wards and incantations have been part of Roman culture for generations. Lucius Petronius contends that faith Based elements can hamper progress, but the amulet wearer stands his ground, referencing how even top doctors sometimes recommend prayer to specific deities, like Asclepius, for healing. The group splits into factions: rationalists on one side, spiritual traditionalists on the other, each passionately defending their viewpoint. A comedic moment arises when someone mentions donkey, liver soup for colds. Two scribes grimace, while one older man smacks his lips, remarking, "Add enough garlic and rosemary, and it's not half bad." The scribe beside him nearly gags at the notion. Laughter ripples through the assembly, temporarily diffusing the tension. In this city, it seems every remedy, no matter how odd, has at least a handful of loyal believers. Tibulia seizes the moment to outline her stance. We can honor the Empire's traditions while testing new ideas. I've seen patients recover quickly when given a honey-based concoction. Whether that honey is mixed with donkey liver, crocodile dung, or simply thyme, the key might be honey's soothing, antimicrobial effect. Why not isolate that and refine the recipe? She sets her clay pot on a small wooden table, beckoning the group forward, as though inviting them to open it. We must learn from trial and error. Eager to move from theory to practice, a young scholar suggests an experiment. If any here has a friend or relative currently battling a cold, we could try different approaches. He glances around, finding no immediate volunteers. Perhaps no one wants to risk being the test subject for donkey, liver stew, or crocodile dung tea. Another comedic chuckle floats through the circle. Nonetheless, the idea of running side-by-side tests intrigues many. You can almost see the gears turning in Lucius Petronius's head. The notion of systematically evaluating remedies might be a step forward. The afternoon light softens, and a new arrival ambles in. A man wearing a chain of small keys, presumably some official administrator from a nearby library. He announces that a fresh shipment of scrolls has arrived, containing fragments from Egyptian medical papyri. Rumor has it there's a section on the usage of reptilian by-products for respiratory ailments. He says, his voice dripping with academic excitement. The group exchanges knowing glances. This could be more fodder for their debate. Already you sense that, in typical Roman fashion, the discussion will continue long into the evening, fueled by equal parts wine and curiosity. Feeling your mind swim with all the conflicting viewpoints, you edge away from the scholars. The lively debate confirms what you already suspected: the Romans are torn between embracing the new and safeguarding the old, between trusting the gods and trusting their own experiments. It's a clash that shapes every aspect of their culture, especially medicine. And within that clash, bizarre cures can find either fervent support or derisive dismissal, or sometimes both, from different corners of the same room. As you drift away from the square, the scholars' voices recede into a blur of Latin phrases and spirited exclamations. You can't help but marvel at how passionately they dissect the crocodile dung cure and other fringe formulas. Yes, it sounds absurd, and maybe it is. But this is Rome, after all, where bridging the gap between tradition and innovation is half the fun. You leave them to their scrolls and theories, certain that by nightfall they'll have conjured fresh arguments or formed new alliances. Whatever the outcome, the debate rages on, each participant convinced they're on the verge of unearthing the next great medical truth. Or at least winning the day's intellectual showdown. You drift onward, letting the echo of scholarly debate fade behind you. The sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky in muted pinks and golds. Shadows lengthen across the cobblestones, and a gentle hush returns to the streets. Yet, you can't shake the feeling that somewhere in the city, under the veil of twilight, more experiments are taking place. Clandestine trials of remedies that are too strange, too risky, or perhaps too valuable to demonstrate in the open. Your wandering leads you to a quieter district lined with modest houses of brick and stucco. The occasional passerby greets you with a polite nod but quickly hurries on, as if there's an unspoken curfew in the air. From a side alley, you detect a subtle glow, torchlight spilling from behind a half-open gate. Intrigued, you inch closer, hearing faint murmurs that suggest a small gathering. You slip past the gate, hoping you're not intruding on some private gathering of conspirators. Instead, you find a narrow courtyard where a handful of people are gathered around an improvised table laden with small clay bowls, cloth bandages, and what looks like a few tubes made of hollow reeds. A slender figure in a simple tunic notices you lingering at the courtyard's edge. She motions you closer, explaining in a hushed tone that they're conducting tests before the first stars appear. Something about gathering the best results under the twilight sky. You stifle a smile at the notion. It sounds romantic, but you suspect it's more about keeping a low profile. We're trying to refine a remedy, she says, pointing to a squat jar set in the center of the table. One that might help with persistent coughs and fevers. You peer inside and immediately recognize that pungent, musky odor, crocodile dung, blended with honey and a dash of something acrid, perhaps vinegar. The small group includes a couple of men, one of them visibly sniffling and coughing, as if living proof that the experiment is needed. Another man, who looks like a craftsman with calloused hands, paces nervously. His breath hitches whenever the coughing man gasps for air. You realize these might be family members, or at least close friends, willing to try nearly anything for relief. You offer a polite nod, unsure if you're welcome at such a private moment. But they seem eager for any witness, perhaps hoping for a second opinion, or just moral support. Quietly, they explain they've been adjusting the recipe. Instead of relying solely on crocodile dung and honey, they're adding crushed pomegranate seeds for their healing properties. The woman insists. Another mentions that they've swapped out standard vinegar for posca, the diluted vinegar drink beloved by Roman soldiers. Less harsh on the throat, but still enough acidity to cut through phlegm, he says. The entire courtyard smells like a mix of sour wine, sweet honey, and that unmistakable whiff of something earthy. You wrinkle your nose slightly, but do your best to hide any squeamish reaction. They ladle a small spoonful of the concoction into a reed tube, using it almost like a dropper. The coughing man, grey circles under his eyes, leans back on a rickety stool while a second helper pinches his nose. You watch in cautious fascination as the woman tips the reed tube between his lips. He winces at the taste. No wonder, considering the ingredients, but manages to swallow. A few onlookers exhale in relief, as if the biggest battle was getting him to take the stuff in the first place. A moment passes. The man coughs again, but this time it's more a reflex than a hacking fit. He rubs his chest, breathing carefully. Everyone leans in, expectant. Historians still argue whether such direct anecdotal trials truly shaped ancient medical knowledge, but in this courtyard, you see the raw reality. They're desperate for improvement, willing to try whatever they can piece together, no matter how unorthodox. If the man's cough eases by morning, the remedy might gain a few more believers. If not, they'll tweak something else. A comedic moment breaks the tension when a bystander jokes, "If that doesn't work, we can always rub donkey whiskers on his feet." The ill man musters a weak grin, as though he'd rather not entertain more bizarre treatments. But the group shares a soft laugh, grateful for any levity. A friend quickly drapes a blanket over his shoulders, reminding him to keep warm in the evening chill. Somewhere overhead, a bat flutters, attracted by the torchlight or perhaps just curious about the human drama unfolding below. Another participant steps forward, an older woman with a kind face. She holds a small copper bowl filled with some kind of warm herbal broth. "We've been giving him this as well," she explains, passing it under your nose for inspection. You inhale the aroma of thyme, garlic, and mint, a far more comforting smell than anything else in the courtyard. "We combine old and new, you see," she continues. "Steam and herbs like the physicians recommend, plus a bit of that Egyptian trick." She shrugs, as if to say, why not cover all bases? Indeed, the Romans rarely discard established traditions, they just layer new ideas on top. The group rotates duties. Someone checks the patient's pulse the way Greek physicians taught. Another drapes fresh bandages soaked in warm water over his chest. You hear a few scattered references to prayers. "We should do a quick invocation to Asclepius," one says. Another counters that they should leave the gods alone tonight, in case offending them yields no result at all. The interplay of faith and doubt dances in the background, as constant as the torchlight flickering on the walls. You lean in to examine the jar of concoction more closely, curiosity getting the better of you. It's thick and dark, with flecks of crushed seeds that look almost like tiny rubies. "Don't smell it too hard," the woman warns with a grin. "We've lost 3 volunteers that way." She's joking, mostly, but you take her advice and keep your distance. You can't help but wonder if, somehow, the honey and other additives really do provide a mild antiseptic effect. One mainstream historical fact is that honey has been prized across cultures for its preservative qualities and soothing properties. Could crocodile dung, in some roundabout way, bring certain minerals or elements that help, too? You're no chemist, but you acknowledge there's still plenty of mystery in how ancient remedies sometimes overlap with modern science. The patient coughs once more, but it's a softer noise, as if something in his throat has cleared. He rubs his eyes, which are teary from all the strain, and exhales deeply. "I can breathe a bit easier," he rasps, blinking in mild surprise. The group collectively perks up, hope sparking in their eyes. Even you feel a slight thrill. Maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's the thick honey soothing his airways, or maybe it's the first step of genuine improvement. In any case, his chest heaves less dramatically, and everyone exchanges relieved smiles. A hush follows, broken only by the crackle of torch flames. The older woman adjusts the patient's blanket, tucking it around him. The slender woman leans toward you, a knowing glimmer in her eyes. "We'll keep testing," she says quietly, "but you saw it, he's a bit better." She sounds half proud, half cautious. Not wanting to jinx it, you suspect. You nod, lips curving into an encouraging smile. After everything you've witnessed, it's hard not to root for them. Their experiment is a far cry from a formal clinical trial, but it represents the earnest pursuit of relief in a world before antibiotics or sanitized medical labs. Historians might label these hush-hush trials as fringe or downright reckless. Yet in Rome's twilight, they reveal something profoundly human. We'll try anything to help those we care about. A comedic whisper from another onlooker, "At least the smell keeps the rats away," earns a few tired chuckles. The patient manages a faint laugh, then coughs again, reminding everyone not to celebrate too soon. Despite the caution, there's a tinge of triumph in the air. They've witnessed a small shift, enough to stoke optimism. The older woman begins tidying up the supplies, rinsing the reed tube with water from a bucket. Someone adds a few more coals to a brazier, warding off the encroaching night chill. You catch bits of hushed conversation. Next time, perhaps more honey. What if we simmer it first? But won't that kill the potency of the dung? The debate is almost scholarly in tone, echoing the more formal arguments you heard earlier, but here it's laced with palpable urgency. Soon they help the patient to his feet, guiding him inside a modest doorway that likely leads to a sleeping area. One person quietly asks, "Shall we pray now?" Another nods, and they step inside as well, leaving you momentarily alone in the courtyard. You glance at the clay jar on the table, pondering how this bizarre remedy, half scorned and half revered, might stand as a testament to Rome's fascination with blending the known and the unknown. In the flickering torchlight, the jar looks almost mystical. A dark brew that holds promise, disgust, and hope all at once. You slip out through the gate, not wanting to overstay your welcome. A lingering sense of respect and wonder accompanies you as you return to the now darkening street. You reflect on how these hush experiments at dawn or dusk shape Roman medicine, just as much as any official doctrine. It's not just about big philosophers making grand claims, it's also ordinary people, in small courtyards, testing and tweaking whatever might work. Maybe tomorrow the rumor spreads that this mix helped one man breathe easier, or maybe it'll vanish if his condition worsens by morning. Either way, the pursuit continues. The sky overhead is a deep cobalt, stars flickering to life. You take a slow breath, letting the mild night air fill your lungs, grateful not to be weighed down by a stubborn cough at this moment. Your footsteps echo on the cobblestones, and you find yourself smiling. Amid all the strange cures, comedic mishaps, and spirited debates, there's a genuine warmth in these ancient streets. Rome, with all its contradictions, keeps you enthralled. You tuck this memory of the courtyard experiments safely away, a quiet reminder that sometimes the most peculiar roads might lead to genuine discoveries, or at least a little faith in the possibility of healing. Morning light glances over the rooftops, and you stir from a restful sleep with renewed curiosity about that hush miracle, remedy. As you make your way toward the city's busier streets, you sense a change in the air, an undercurrent of chatter, as though someone's dropped a pebble into the pond of Roman society and set off ripples of debate. Already, you hear snatches of conversation about some man who supposedly turned the corner on a nasty cold after swallowing a spoonful of that bizarre crocodile honey mix. Others scoff at the very idea, praising donkey, liver soup or anise-infused wine instead. Whichever side they land on, people are definitely talking. Your first stop is a small bakery near the Forum, always a good vantage point for local gossip. You join a line of bleary-eyed patrons waiting for fresh bread. Two women just ahead of you chat in hushed but animated tones. One insists that her neighbor's nephew tried the crocodile remedy last night and woke up this morning breathing like a champion gladiator. The other woman rolls her eyes so dramatically you half expect them to roll right out of her head. She retorts that donkey whiskers placed under the pillow are at least odorless. A cackle ensues, prompting a nearby baker to poke her head out. Hey, if you think donkey whiskers smell better than honey dung, you haven't worked a day with actual donkey whiskers. As the queue shuffles forward, you reach the counter, greet the baker, and order a loaf still warm from the oven. A comedic spark flares when the baker confides he actually tried donkey liver soup once, but only because an old friend claimed it could unlock hidden singing talent. It didn't, and the friend still owes him a favor for that little culinary misadventure. You chuckle, half imagining a scenario where people form an entire donkey liver choir in the hopes of hitting perfect high notes. With bread in hand, you cross the street to a public fountain, where a small crowd gathers around a street corner orator. He's perched on a makeshift dais, a wooden crate propped beside the fountain's basin. Good citizens of Rome, he bellows, do not be duped by outlandish cures. One hand flails as though swatting invisible bees. He rails against the crocodile concoction, calling it a waste of coin and an insult to Roman dignity. You notice a few listeners nod in agreement, while others mutter that maybe the orator hasn't been the one coughing his lungs out at midnight. A tall man in the audience, wearing a tunic dyed a gaudy shade of purple, cuts in with a sly grin. You talk a lot for someone who can't breathe through his own nose. Indeed, the orator has an unmistakable nasally tone. The crowd titters. Seizing the opportunity, the purple, tunicked man brandishes a small clay jar. I have it right here, he declares with the theatrics of a stage actor. It saved me from 4 days of misery. Are you too proud to try it? The orator splutters but can't hide a waver of uncertainty behind his bravado. Some onlookers look torn. Roman pride dictates skepticism, but who wants to suffer a head cold longer than necessary? Leaving this impromptu debate, you drift toward a cluster of shops overlooking a busy intersection. A mild breeze brings the scent of roasting chestnuts and sweet pastries. Among the vendors, you spot a middle-aged woman hawking clay figurines. You can't help but pause. Each figure looks like a miniature crocodile with a sly grin, carrying a tiny pot labeled with H Floody. You ask her about it, trying not to laugh at the bizarre mash-up of art and advertisement. She explains she came up with these figurines when she heard local rumors exploding about the new remedy. If it's going to be popular, she says with a shrug, I might as well turn a profit. You sense half of her stock is satire. Romans have a knack for capitalizing on trends, no matter how strange. Nearby, a scrawny street performer has set up a comedic routine. Dressed in a patchwork cloak, he pantomimes a sneezy Roman searching for a cure. He pretends to drink from a jar labeled with a crocodile drawing, makes an exaggerated face, then breaks into a lively dance, presumably to show he's now brimming with energy. The small crowd roars with laughter, tossing him coins. One child pipes up, Papa, can we get some? The father ruffles the boy's hair. Maybe after you're older, kid. That draws more laughter. Clearly, the remedy is trending, and folks are happy to poke fun at it, even as some quietly wonder if it might genuinely work. Slipping away from the performer, you amble through a residential district. Here, the vibe is more subdued. Laundry flutters on lines strung between windows, and neighbors gossip from their doorsteps. One elderly man leans against a brick wall, scratching his chin while discussing the remedy with a younger woman. Historians still argue whether Romans truly believed these exotic cures or just enjoyed the novelty. He muses, as though reciting a line from a dusty scroll. The younger woman suggests that it doesn't matter. If people feel better, who's to say it's not real? She then sighs, adding that her son's cough hasn't responded to thyme steam or donkey liver stew, so maybe it's time for something new. Her voice trails off, heavy with the worry of a parent who's out of options. As twilight edges closer, you notice more flickering torches being set along the streets. You pause at an intersection, overhearing two men engaged in a lively spat. One is a devout cynic, the other a wide-eyed believer. The cynic scoffs, I'd sooner eat the raw donkey whiskers than swallow that stinking brew. His adversary fires back. At least donkey whiskers might tickle my throat. It's better than your negativity! They glare at each other before an exasperated bystander steps in. Gentlemen, do we have to pick sides? If donkey whiskers or crocodile dung can cure the sniffles, let them both exist. Just please don't mix them. The tension breaks into laughter, and you can't help but smile. Romans love a spirited debate, but they also love a quick, comedic out. One mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Rome, with its intricate road system and bustling trade, has always been a melting pot of ideas. Medical knowledge, or the semblance of it, travels rapidly from Egypt to Gaul to the capital's doorsteps. As you watch the day's final merchants pack up their stalls, you see jars of honey stacked beside exotic herbs, donkey, liver extracts, and lumps of what might be resin or possibly old bits of something best not identified. It's a carnival of possibilities, each stall owner calling out that their product is the surest route to health. No more donkey whiskers. No more stinky dung. Just try my saffron infusion. Everyone fights for the spotlight. Leaving the main street, you find yourself in a quiet courtyard near a small temple. The statue of a minor deity stands watch, draped in a simple linen cloth. A half-faded inscription at its base implores passers-by to make offerings for good health. You notice a few coins and a small bouquet of herbs lying at the statue's feet. Perhaps local residents still prefer a gentle prayer to hush any illness. You pause to consider how belief, tradition, and newfangled remedies collide in this empire, sometimes swirling into a comedic swirl of donkey hair and crocodile waste, other times forging legitimate leaps in medical practice. Overhead, a swallow darts through the air, chasing the last rays of sun. You lean against the temple's column, reflecting on all the voices you've heard today. Some vehemently oppose the strange cure, others swear by it. The rest remain on the fence, waiting for more proof, or just quietly hoping not to need such extremes. Your own stance, you're an observer, enthralled by how an entire city can spin itself into a minor frenzy over one rumored cure. In a place where daily life fuses logic, superstition, engineering marvels, and comedic donkey references, it's hardly surprising that public opinion runs hot. As darkness settles, a final wave of chatter echoes in distant streets. You sense that tomorrow will bring new tales, maybe a sudden spike in sales for honey jars, or an outcry from official physicians warning about contamination. Or perhaps an edict from some exasperated magistrate, no more hawking dung-based potions in public forums. But for now, the city winds down, each household carrying its own judgments and stories. You push off the column, whispering a quiet thanks to the watchful deity, and move on with a contented sigh. Rome's unending swirl of skepticism and belief has become part of your own nightly rhythm. And as the torchlit roads guide you onward, you know the debate over this odd remedy isn't ending anytime soon. Indeed, it's only just beginning. You wend through another web of streets until you emerge near the city's eastern gate, where the fading daylight casts long silhouettes across the broad thoroughfare leading out of Rome. Beyond the gate, caravan after caravan sets off on the famed roads that connect the capital to distant lands. You pause, recalling how the empire's reach extends from the rocky coasts of Britannia to the sands of Africa. And you can't help but wonder how far these rumors of the crocodile honey remedy travel. If Roman citizens are abuzz with debate, what about the neighboring regions that receive merchants and travelers fresh from the capital? The thought lingers as you step outside Rome's walls. The countryside stretches before you in a patchwork of cultivated fields and dusty roads. A cluster of traveling traders, huddled around a makeshift campfire, catches your eye. Judging by their attire, loose trousers, embroidered tunics, these folks likely come from the fringes of the empire, or perhaps even beyond. You decide to join them, figuring their conversation might offer a glimpse into how these rumors spread past Roman borders. One of the traders, a burly man wearing a leather vest adorned with small bronze discs, eyes you with mild curiosity as you approach. Realizing you pose no threat, he waves you over to share the warmth of the fire. The others nod politely. The group's language is a lively mix of local dialects and heavily accented Latin, but you piece together that they've been hauling goods across Gaul, Hispania, and even the Germanic frontier. They speak of frontier towns where Roman outposts nestle beside indigenous villages, places where ideas mingle as freely as trade goods. Have you heard about this crocodile remedy? You ask casually, once you sense a lull in their conversation. Several heads snap up, eyebrows raised. A wiry woman with a thick accent breaks into a grin. Oh, that nonsense from Rome. We've heard travelers talk about it along the route, she says. Some claim it's the best thing since sliced bread. She laughs at her own joke, though ironically, Romans don't quite do sliced bread the way you might imagine in modern times. Still, you can't resist a grin. A lanky young man pipes up. They say a traveling merchant sold a jar in a Gallic village. The local chieftain tried it for a nasty cough. He shrugs. Half the villagers apparently think he's more lively now. The other half say it's pure coincidence. Typical, you think even across provincial lines, skepticism battles curiosity. You can almost picture a Gallic elder rolling his eyes at the notion of swallowing crocodile dung for relief, while the chieftain claims it's a gift from Roman gods. The burly man chimes in. Historians still argue whether these fringe provinces eagerly adopt Roman customs or cling to their own cures. Seems like a bit of both. He tosses a stick on the fire, sending sparks flying into the dusk. We've seen local druids experiment with Roman herbs, and some might even sneak a pinch of this new dung and honey blend into their potions if it means healing a tribal warrior faster. A comedic image flashes in your mind of a druid muttering incantations over a cauldron, carefully spooning in crocodile honey paste with the same reverence they'd show mistletoe. As the conversation unfolds, one mainstream historical fact emerges: the Roman Empire was a cultural mosaic, absorbing and reshaping the knowledge of conquered peoples. Medical practices from Greece, Egypt, and beyond cross-pollinated with local traditions, leading to a diverse tapestry of beliefs about healing. Even donkey whiskers might have found their way into Celtic concoctions if a persuasive enough merchant made the pitch. But the crocodile remedy seems particularly eyebrow-raising, even among open-minded frontier folks. The wiry woman shares a quirky tidbit: in one remote settlement near the Danube, villagers reportedly tried blending the crocodile honey powder with fermented mare's milk instead of water or wine. They claim it's a surefire cure for chills, she says, rolling her eyes. But I imagine it tastes like sore nightmares. Everyone around the campfire snorts with laughter, sending the conversation on a brief detour to the worst tasting concoctions they've encountered on the road. You hear mentions of pickled fish eyes and burned goat hair, each claim more outrageous than the last. Your nose crinkles in sympathy. Looking up at the stars beginning to flicker overhead, you envision how the empire's roads carry this bizarre remedy from city to city, each place adding its own flair. In Carthage, maybe they mix it with local spices. In Alexandria, where the idea might have originated, they might raise an amused eyebrow at Rome's wide-eyed acceptance of something that Egyptians themselves might see as a fringe practice. Could be that only certain healers in Egypt ever recommended crocodile dung, while the majority prefer more standard herbs. But once a rumor hits Rome, it can ricochet across the provinces, gathering momentum as it goes. Eventually, one of the traders gestures toward a wooden crate near his pack horse. "We carry odds and ends for curious folk," he says. "A little mere resin, some exotic spices, and yes," he adds with a conspiratorial grin, "a small stash of that crocodile mixture. We resell it at double the price. People out here think anything from Rome must be gold." He chuckles, but there's an undercurrent of pride in his voice, as though he's tapped into a goldmine of gullible sniffle sufferers. The group jokes about how some suspicious buyer once demanded proof it was genuine crocodile dung. The traders ended up rummaging through old papyrus labels and forging a symbolic crocodile stamp. "We're not exactly lying," the burly man says, "but we definitely lean on the mystique." The atmosphere around the campfire grows warm with comedic self-awareness, and you can't help but shake your head at how marketing savvy some folks can be. Even in ancient times, you settle back on your makeshift seat, letting the fire's heat seep into your bones. The talk turns to other Roman imports that neighboring cultures either love or loathe: bathhouse etiquette, some find it too immodest. Gladiator games, a few frontier towns see them as violent nonsense. And of course, the humoral theory. Trying to explain blood, phlegm, and bile to a Celtic druid is like teaching a donkey to dance. One trader quips, prompting another round of laughter. The donkey references, it seems, are never ending in this empire. Eventually someone wonders aloud, if donkey soup and crocodile dung can help with colds, what about snake oil from distant Asia? The wiry woman raises a brow. "We might have to wait until next year's caravan for that," she jokes. "Or maybe we'll just ship a few crates ourselves, label them Mystic Serpent Salve, and triple our profit." The line between genuine medical interest and opportunistic commerce is razor thin, and these travelers are well aware of it. A lull follows, broken only by the crackle of flames and the soft rustle of wind through the sparse trees. You realize that, while some provinces may scoff at the idea of crocodile-based cures, the cure's novelty still finds receptive pockets wherever Roman influence stretches. Perhaps a tribal chief is intrigued enough to buy a jar. Perhaps a merchant sells a pinch to an ailing dignitary who doesn't want to appear behind the times. Little by little, the remedy seeps into folk medicine. One trader stretches, yawning. "We head north in the morning," he announces, toward the Rhine. "We'll see if those Germanic tribes want to give it a try." He rubs his hands together, as though already counting the silver denarii. The idea of crocodile dung crossing rivers and forests to reach frostbitten frontier forts is almost surreal. Yet you can see it happening. Word of mouth is unstoppable, especially when it's spiced with exotic flair. The talk winds down, and the traders begin rolling out blankets to catch a few hours of sleep. You thank them for the insight, stepping away from the fire's glow. As you wander back toward the city gate, the sky is fully dark. Torchlight from the walls glints on your path, guiding you through the flickering gloom. You mull over how swiftly Romans themselves adopt new cures. sometimes with blind enthusiasm, sometimes with wry skepticism, and how these attitudes ripple outward, shaping the perceptions of neighboring peoples. It's both comedic and endearing that something so questionable could unite an empire in collective curiosity. Crossing back under the gate, you catch sight of a Roman guard stamping his feet against the chill. If he's caught a cold, you think wryly, maybe tomorrow a trader will offer him the crocodile honey special. If so, he'll have to decide whether to take the leap of faith or stick to the donkey liver approach. Either way, rumor will continue weaving its tapestry across continents, forging unlikely alliances and hilarious misunderstandings. You wrap your cloak tighter as you slip into the quiet streets, mind buzzing with images of distant tribes passing around small jars of pungent, honeyed powder. Rome's reach truly knows no bounds, and if a little crocodile dung can travel the empire in the name of health, well, who are we to argue with progress? The next evening finds you ambling through a quieter quarter of Rome, reflecting on the swirl of rumors and beliefs that have enshrouded this peculiar cold remedy. You've heard praise, skepticism, curiosity, and more than a fair share of jokes. A soft drizzle has begun, glossing the rooftops and making the lamplight shimmer against the wet cobblestones. Each step you take resonates with a low echo, as though the city itself has grown contemplative. It's a perfect setting for pondering the deeper truths behind what you've witnessed. Unraveling, if you will, the myths tangled around crocodile dung, donkey whiskers, and the many other outlandish cures. You come upon a modest building with an arched entrance and a small sign that reads, in faint lettering, Historia Vita, Knowledge for All. A passing neighbor informs you it's a private library and study hall, run by a retired scribe who once served the state archives. The thought of an evening spent poring over old scrolls and documents appeals to you. Perhaps there's something in those parchment piles that can shed light on whether this bizarre remedy truly has any shred of scientific basis. Or if it's just a comedic highlight reel for Roman gullibility. Stepping through the arched doorway, you find a cozy interior with dim lamps illuminating rows of wooden shelves. The smell of old papyrus, dust, and a faint whiff of melted candle wax greets you like a musty but welcoming hug. A lean, elderly man wearing a simple tunic glances up from behind a desk. He offers a polite nod, as though he's used to wanderers coming in search of obscure knowledge. When you mention you're looking into the weird crocodile honey remedy, he arches an eyebrow. So you've fallen down that rabbit hole, he says, voice tinged with amused resignation. Let's see what we can find in the stacks. He leads you through the maze of scrolls, occasionally pausing to pull out a likely candidate. Some are treatises on ancient Egyptian medical practices, others are Roman compilations of remedies from conquered lands. As you settle at a low wooden table, the scribe gently unrolls one scroll that seems especially promising. Its edges are brittle, and the script has faded in places. You squint at the neat rows of Latin text interspersed with Greek words. It's an old transcription from a Greek traveler in Egypt, the scribe explains. He recorded local cures, including some that used the excrement of various animals, crocodiles among them. Skimming the lines, you piece together references to how crocodile dung was occasionally applied topically for wounds. Perhaps the dryness or certain enzymes reduced infection, though that's speculation at best. Honey, on the other hand, was widely known for its antibacterial properties. One mainstream historical fact: honey was used to dress wounds and preserve foods across many ancient cultures. Combining these two ingredients in a medicinal formula might not be entirely random. Still, you can't help the comedic image floating through your mind, the trial and error involved in concluding. Yes, let's swirl him some reptile poop. The scribe chuckles at your expression, as though reading your thoughts. He unrolls another scroll, more fragmentary than the first. This is a partial text from an Egyptian physician named Chio M. Heb, or something close to that, he says, brushing a speck of dust away. It alludes to purging evil forces, with a mixture that includes excrement honey and various herbs. But is it the same formula we have here in Rome? Hard to say. The lines are incomplete, sentences trailing off into blanks. Historians still argue whether these references were more symbolic, using strong-smelling substances to ward off spirits, or if they genuinely believed in a physiological effect. The scribe remarks. You give a short laugh, imagining some poor patient in ancient Egypt thinking, well, if it smells this bad, it must work. Another comedic thought crosses your mind. Maybe the true reason it relieves congestion is that your nose simply goes on strike and stops noticing anything else. The scribe snorts, thoroughly amused. Apparently, even dusty library corners can host a sense of humor. The next scroll you open is a Roman compilation that lists dozens of outlandish remedies, each with a brief commentary from an anonymous critic who signs every page with a stylized hawk feather. For donkey whiskers, the commentator writes, "Utter rubbish, unless you fancy a mouthful of bristles." For donkey liver soup, a slightly softer stance might nourish you but cure. Unlikely. Then you get to the crocodile honey entry. The critic's note reads, "Curiously popular. Some claim real results, others call it a farce. Proceed with caution and a strong stomach." You can't resist a grin. Apparently, cynicism about bizarre cures is nothing new. The scribe sets a small clay lamp on the table, its glow dancing across the scroll's surface. He muses aloud. Romans have always merged rational medicine with older, superstitious elements. Even Galen wrote about certain folk practices he deemed nonsense. But occasionally, amid the nonsense, we find something that works. The question is which part of the crocodile honey mix is truly beneficial, if any. You nod, recalling how honey alone can soothe a sore throat. Perhaps the dung is just a flamboyant dash of exotic flair and an easy marketing hook for enterprising merchants. A younger researcher, maybe an apprentice to the scribe, wanders over, having overheard your conversation. With a mischievous smile, she suggests that the remedy's potency might rest in the mental belief it inspires, a powerful placebo effect, she calls it. The more outrageous the cure, the stronger the faith people place in it. It's a quirky or fringe tidbit that resonates. Humans love novelty. And if that novelty triggers hope, maybe the body responds. She mentions a friend who overcame a persistent cough after reciting a nightly incantation to her cat. It probably had more to do with time and rest. The researcher concedes, but who can say for sure? The hours slip away as you sift through references, stacking scrolls with mentions of dung-based cures, honey salves, or anything tangentially related. You find fleeting bits of logic. Some texts discuss how certain soils or excrement might contain trace minerals that, when dried, help counter bacterial growth. Others frame the mixture as purely magical, meant to repel evil spirits believed to cause respiratory illness. Over and over, you see the same pattern. Honey is praised, the dung is debated, and the combination remains a puzzle. Late into the evening, you push back from the table, eyes tired yet mind buzzing with insight. If there's a unifying truth, it's that the Romans never rely on just one explanation. They'll take a piece of Greek rationalism, blend it with Egyptian mysticism, add a sprinkling of local superstition, and wrap it all in a sense of grand spectacle. Then they'll sell it on the street corner, or whisper about it over dinner. Even now, you're not entirely sure if the crocodile honey remedy boasts genuine medicinal properties or is simply a potent mashup of belief and hype. Maybe it's a bit of both. On the way out, the scribe and his apprentice walk you to the door. He thanks you for reminding him that these ancient scrolls aren't just dusty relics, they're living threads connecting human curiosity across centuries. With a smile, he jokes, "Next time you catch a cold, come see me. I'll brew you a fresh batch of reading material." You roll your eyes in good humor, imagining sipping on scrolls doesn't quite have the same effect as steam inhalation. But it's probably less pungent than donkey liver stew or crocodile dung. Stepping into the rainy night, you pull your cloak tight against the drizzle. Somehow, despite the gloom, there's a lightness in your step. Perhaps it's the realization that myths aren't always hollow nonsense. They often contain fragments of real knowledge and reflect deep human desires. Desires to conquer illness, to find certainty where none exists, to spin a good tale. In ancient Rome, all those desires swirl together in a vibrant tapestry of donkey bits, honey jars, incantations, and scholarly treatises. You stroll back toward your lodging, half tempted to poke your head into the nearest apothecary and see if they've refined the remedy yet. Maybe they've found a way to keep the honey's soothing properties without the more questionable components. Then again, that might rob the mixture of its mystique. And let's face it, the city thrives on a good story. Still, your investigations have granted you a better grasp on what might be at play. A collision of raw practicality, honey's healing, and pure spectacle, crocodile dung's outrageous novelty. In your heart, you suspect that's precisely the sort of fusion Rome adores. A donkey brays somewhere in the distance, punctuating your reflection with a comedic flourish. You chuckle softly, deciding there could be no better closing note. Rain or shine, myth or fact, the search for that elusive perfect remedy continues. You slip down a side lane, letting the soft patter of rainfall accompany your final musings. Tomorrow, the city will awake to more chatter, more jokes, more references to donkey whiskers and crocodile droppings. And as long as people sneeze, they'll keep unraveling, and at times re-raveling, the myths, hoping to snag a shred of truth that might banish the common cold for good. The next morning greets you with soft sunlight spilling through half-drawn shutters and the distant clink of pottery. A lazy hush envelops the city, hinting that it has not yet shaken off the night's slumber. You slip into the streets to see Rome in this fleeting gentleness, feeling an undercurrent of nostalgia wash over you. It strikes you that your time peeling back the layers of this odd, Roman cold remedy, part crocodile dung, part honey, part rumor, has come full circle. You've hovered in midnight alleys, watched hush experiments in lantern-lit courtyards and witnessed comedic spats under the noonday sun. And through it all, you've glimpsed the essence of Rome, a vast tapestry of contradictions, where logic tangles with law, and grand architecture shelters everyday hopes and fears. As you pass a wall plastered with faded notices, you spot a fresh poster scrawled with neat letters. "Hailed by the honeyed beast!" Ask at the forum. Someone has apparently coined a catchy nickname for that bizarre concoction. The honeyed beast, presumably referencing the crocodile. You let out a soft laugh, imagining how easily the city's love for catchy slogans can transform even the most outlandish cure into a household phrase. You pause, remembering a mainstream historical fact: the Romans' adept use of public notices and slogans extended from political propaganda to commercial announcements, so it's no surprise that medical trends also find their way onto these peeling walls. Before long, your wanderings lead you around a bend, where you catch sight of an older man hunched over a small table near his doorway, scribbling furiously. He glances up and beckons you closer, a crooked smile on his face. "I'm documenting stories of the honeyed beast," he says, tapping his stylus on a wax tablet. "Some folks here claim it works wonders. Others found it worthless. I plan to record both sides." You realize he's compiling a local record, an informal chronicle, capturing the city's divided opinion on this remedy. Historians still argue whether these ephemeral tablets ever made it into official archives, but for now, this man is shaping a version of history all his own. He nudges a small basket of figs in your direction, inviting you to sit while he regales you with the latest gossip. In a gentle voice, he recounts how a senator's daughter supposedly overcame her nagging cough after just 2 doses. On the flip side, a local baker who tried it swears he woke up feeling worse, convinced the stuff gave him nightmares of rampaging crocodiles. A comedic scenario, the man says with a soft chuckle, but he tossed the jar in the Tiber and prayed Neptune would accept it as an offering. As you linger, you realize that beyond the comedic extremes, the remedy has become a symbol, stand-in for Rome's insatiable quest to tame the unknown. Quirky or fringe tidbit, indeed. This city, flush with artistic triumphs and engineering marvels, also harbors a timeless hunger for the miraculous. Whether it's the rumor of donkey whiskers or the slight possibility that crocodile dung might hold medicinal secrets, Romans can't resist trying to tip the balance of fate in their favor. Perhaps it's the same drive that led them to conquer lands from Gaul to Egypt in the first place, a deep-seated belief that the world's riches, be they gold or cures, exist to be discovered and harnessed. Eventually, you bid farewell to the chronicler, stepping back into the thinning crowd. A few footfalls later, you recognize the quiet archway leading to that old courtyard from nights before. A fleeting notion. You wonder if the patient who tested the remedy is fully recovered, or if he's still sipping some revised formula in hopes of a final reprieve. The courtyard gate is locked this morning, so you can't see for yourself, but you like to imagine that he breathes easier now, maybe sitting with a warm mug of herbal broth. Even if the remedy's success lies mostly in honey's soothing properties, belief itself can be a potent force. A mild breeze carries the aroma of baked bread from a nearby shop, stirring your appetite. You glide toward the bakery's open window, where a friendly voice calls you over. Today's specialty: honey cakes with a dash of thyme. No donkey whiskers or crocodile lumps here, just a comforting Roman treat. You buy a small bundle and nibble on a sweet, fragrant piece, savoring how thyme adds a pleasant tang to the honey's mellow sweetness. You can't help but smile at the simple synergy. The same ingredient that finds its way into cough remedies is also a staple for sweet indulgences. Everywhere you turn, the city is winding down its anxious speculation. Rome has a short collective memory. New rumors and fads quickly eclipse old ones. Yet you sense a legacy forming here, a lasting impression that won't vanish overnight. People have asked each other, what if it truly works? And that question alone keeps the remedy alive. Perhaps in one corner of the empire, a traveling apothecary is already championing the formula, while in another, a skeptical philosopher is drafting a treatise debunking it. Thus does Rome's grand conversation roll on, never concluding but always evolving. As you cross a small footbridge over a canal, you pause to watch carp lazily weave through the water. A donkey, trotting along the bank with a pair of clay water jugs, brays in protest at its owner's urging. The donkey stands, an unintentional symbol, reminding you how easily the everyday beast finds its place in Roman cures. You give the donkey a respectful nod, thinking of how comedic it is that something so humble can share a stage with exotic reptiles in the city's medical folklore. You climb a gentle incline toward a row of cypress trees, enjoying the hush that falls as you leave the busiest streets behind. The city's hum recedes into a soft murmur, and you reflect on the twisted threads of this entire journey: the comedic donkey, liver broths, the incantations in lamplit courtyards, the fervent debates among scholars, the traveling merchants hawking jars of questionable contents, and the unstoppable swirl of rumor feeding Rome's imagination. This place, you realize, is a testament to how human curiosity refuses to be tamed, constantly colliding with faith, science, commerce, and hope. By the time you reach a quiet overlook, the sun sits low on the horizon. Terracotta rooftops glow with warm light, and the Tiber sparkles like a silver ribbon meandering through the city's heart. From up here, Rome looks peaceful, a grand ancient creature at rest, breathing gently in the late afternoon calm. You close your eyes, letting the hush drape over you. It's a fitting final moment, a reminder that even in a city brimming with bustle and drama, stillness can be found. The cure, the rumors, the comedic asides, all fade into the broader tapestry of life, as ephemeral yet significant as a single day's turn from dawn to dusk. Somewhere below, a donkey brays again, and you stifle a laugh. Good old donkey, you think. Good old Rome, with its brilliant aqueducts and donkey liver soups. With a gentle sigh, you let the last rays of sunlight warm your face, grateful to have glimpsed so many corners of this empire's daily life. Even if the crocodile remedy never becomes the ultimate cure, its story endures. A testament to Rome's boundless thirst for discovery. And as the shadows lengthen, you step away from the overlook, letting the city cradle you in its timeless lull. The day mellows into evening, and your body seems to float on a wave of contentment. All around you, the soft hush of dusk settles in. Lamplight begins to glow through windows, and a gentle breeze stirs the tops of tall cypress trees. You walk slowly, each step quieter than the last, as if Rome itself is whispering goodnight. The sky fades into purple and deep blue, and the silhouettes of rooftops form a serene skyline. One by one, voices soften, footsteps recede, and the city's heartbeat grows gentler. Can you feel your own breath slowing? Each inhale feels just a bit deeper, and each exhale releases the weight of the day. You curl your shoulders back, letting them sink into a soothing posture. The smell of warm stone and faint traces of incense drift your way, a comforting reminder that night has always carried its own magic. Candlelit windows glow like tiny stars against the ancient walls, offering a sense of safety, of refuge. Somewhere, a lute melody floats from an open doorway, a lullaby, perhaps gently plucked by a tired musician. It mingles with the steady hum of distant crickets, creating a timeless lull that invites your mind to drift. Every breath you take ushers in a wave of calm, a quiet assurance that whatever wonders or worries have filled your day can now rest. You deserve this moment of tranquility, of release. As you pause, closing your eyes, imagine you're cocooned by soft blankets, rocked gently by a city that's eased into slumber. Each slow heartbeat resonates with the ancient streets below, as though you and Rome share a single, soothing rhythm. Let the warmth of this evening wrap around you, and feel your thoughts grow light, airy, almost dreamlike. Here, in the gentle hush of night, you're safe. You're at peace. And as the last echoes fade, you exhale a final breath, welcoming the sweet drift into deep, restful sleep.